Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see what if Deku was chosen by Godzilla movie. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is MHA x Godzilla by Anthony Tyler 9. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. This just in. A kaiju attack has just been seen coming towards the shorelines of Japan. We urge our citizens to head to fallout shelters in order to get away from the kaiju. A voice from the television said, before it was turned off. A young man was seen standing near the front door of his home as he looked back at his mother, who was behind him as well. "Alright Izuku, do you have everything you need to go to the store with me?" Izuku's mother asked. "I have everything, Mom. We need to head out soon. The kaiju are coming near Japan's coast, so we need to keep everything short," Izuku said, as his mother sighed sadly before nodding. As the small family of two moved out of their home to get some groceries, they had failed to listen to the rest of the broadcast, as it made mention that those who were going to the shopping mall that day were going to be subjected to the battle of the kaiju that were duking it out. As Izuku and his mother walked around the aisles of the store, they felt the ground vibrate slightly as they looked to one another before nodding. Continuing to collect their things, they heard the roar of a kaiju nearby as the building was broken down, causing those within to run away. Izuku placed himself over his mother in order to protect her from the building's collapse. Once everything was said and done, Izuku woke up to a devastated area and to see two titans fighting against one another nearby, and he saw his mother near him as she tried to move some rubble. "Izuku," she called out, as he groaned, gaining her attention. Once she started to move the rubble out of the way, she managed to pull him out from underneath all of it when Izuku noticed how a stray blast of electricity and atomic energy was moving towards them. Mom. We need to move," Izuku said, as he tried to move both himself and her out of the way, only to be met with his mother blocking the hit from him. "Don't worry baby, I will protect you," she said, as both attacks hit her dead on and disintegrated her from this world, but most importantly they were absorbed by his body. "Goo." Izuku groaned as his body had felt so full that he couldn't move. "What the heck just entered my body? I can't move at all," Izuku thought to himself as he noticed the lack of a presence from his mother. Looking up from his groaning, he saw what remained of her clothing on the ground as her body was nowhere to be seen. Mom?" Izuku asked, with a broken voice. In the sky, a fight was happening between Godzilla and Ghidorah. The Monster Zero had been attempting to get Godzilla to stand down, but he wouldn't. It wasn't long before Godzilla had forced the monster to flee from the area, as he managed to drive him off. Godzilla looked around at the devastation of the city of Japan, and he couldn't help but feel remorse for what had happened. His fight with Ghidorah had been pulled towards the innocence of Earth, but that is besides the point. He was the king of the monsters, and why did he bring the fight here? Looking around, he found a small trace of radiation coming from the ground nearby, and as he moved closer to the source, he soon found it. A small boy, from his perspective, was lying on the ground crying over a small pile of clothes that looked feminine. Oh dear. He killed a family member of a human again. Sighing internally, he had no idea of what to do. This boy had the gift of Mother Gaia, and he couldn't allow him to be in the hands of the humans as of right now. He seemed to be relatively young, so that wouldn't matter for now. Leaning over, he found the boy hearing his growling before looking up at him with shock, fear as well as sadness. It had been millions of years since he last connected with a human, but he must make sure that the little hatchling was all right and take him somewhere safe. Once he felt a connection with the small being, he began to speak to him telepathically. "Hello little human, I'm terribly sorry for what happened. I should have been able to keep Ghidorah away from this place. I can't keep you in the hands of humans for a while. Mother Gaia's gift has been developing within you for a small while. You need to gestate within a radiated core in order to develop further," Godzilla said to the young boy. He looked around the place to try and find where the voice was coming from before looking up and pointing at him. Giving the boy a nod, he looks at the clothes on the ground before grabbing them, and as soon as Godzilla's hand was lowered enough to pick him up, he climbed on as they headed towards the nearest water source. "I'm going to have to place you within my mouth in order to keep you alive." "I'm sorry," Godzilla said, as Izuku nodded his head as he was placed inside the monster's mouth. Once it was completed, Godzilla found the ocean as he entered it and swam towards where his radiator core was within the planet. As soon as a few hours had passed, They arrived within the core, and it was revealed to be the lost city of Atlantis. Godzilla opened his maw and placed the young boy on the ground as Izuku explored the area. He knew that Godzilla and Ghidorah was the cause of his mother's death. But he didn't blame the protector of Earth for it. He was only fighting with the monster so that he wouldn't cause the end of the planet, so he would place the entire blame on the monster for it. As soon as Godzilla had placed himself near the core of the planet, he started to absorb the radiation of the planet as he rejuvenated himself. Izuku at this point had placed himself against his giant arm as he laid back holding the clothes of his late mother. "What happens to me now?" Izuku asked. "You will undergo the transformation of becoming a Titan. But other than that, you will get to keep your body," Godzilla said, as he slowly glowed a dark blue and black before revealing his human form. He was taller than Izuku's father at 6 feet 7 and had gray scales that covered his arms and legs as well as upper torso around his neck. The scales formed a sort of armor around the man as he held a Nodachi sword on his hip. On his rear, his tail moved out as far as twice his human form. "I'm terribly sorry about what happened to your mother, but in order to fully make you a Titan, I will need to place you within an egg before giving you the right of reincarnation," Godzilla said, as he led Izuku over to where an egg was placed. What happened to this egg?" Izuku asked. "This egg was what used to be my son. But as you can see, it has been broken to pieces. Ghidorah had broken it since it had traces of my mate's blood within," Godzilla said, growling. "So, what does that have to do with me?" Izuku asked, as Godzilla looked sad at him. "I would have to consume you in the egg so that it could be bonded with both me and Mothra. Once the process is complete, I will essentially lay the egg here so that you could gestate to become a new Gojira," Godzilla said, looking down at the ground. "Oh, well, at least I have a choice, right?" Izuku asked. "Well, there is either that or experience the pain of having to become a Titan without that method. Your body would be placed under many pressures in order to transform you into one of us, but you would still become similar to myself since my power is coursing through you. But you would also have the power over electricity, based on the power of Ghidorah I sense within you," Godzilla said, as Izuku looked pale. "Why, you know what? I think I would rather take the egg option," Izuku mumbled as Godzilla rubbed the boy's back. "Oh yeah, before the ceremony begins. You will need to know what will happen once you become one of my kind," Godzilla said, as Izuku pulled out a notebook, from seemingly nowhere. "Once you become part of my race, you will gain instincts to either mate with someone nearby because of your alpha predator instincts. But that won't happen until your Titan blood would become as old as you are now," Godzilla said, as Izuku looked at him weirdly. "Godzilla, you do know that I am 14, right?" Izuku asked, as the creature looked at him shocked. "I thought you were just a 10-year-old, he said, placing his hands over the sides of his face. "Well, I look younger than I am because of the fact that I am short. I always wanted to be slightly taller to seem more like my age. But whatever, that means people would not take me seriously," Izuku said, as he looked at the egg. So how do we do this?" Izuku asked as Godzilla gained a serious look. "You climb into the egg, and as it closes around you I will transform into my Titan form and swim over to Mothra's home. There we will. Do you know what, before the egg is in bed with both of our powers. But if anything, you would become a Titan since you would be lathered in our—" "You know," Godzilla said, as Izuku nodded his head blushing. "Well, when should we start?" Izuku asked, as Godzilla looked at him for a second before thinking. "Do you want to do it now?" he asked, as Izuku nodded. "All right, let's begin the process," Godzilla said, as Izuku climbed into the 2-meter-tall egg. As soon as he was situated inside of the egg, he watched as the flaps of the egg had folded over, leaving Izuku in darkness as he felt the surrounding eggshell be lifted from the ground and be completely eaten. He felt the egg's walls be pushed against his body as the egg got his measurements from being squeezed tight. As soon as that was done, Izuku felt something prodding his skin and found some needle-like threads that were piercing though his skin. "Oh wow, that is weird but slightly worrying," Izuku said to himself as he felt the world around himself become more and more distant from consciousness. On the outside, Godzilla had entered the water as he made his way over to his mate Mothra. He knew that the insect would be happy about him giving her another chance to have a child once more. He could only hope that Ghidorah wouldn't find out about this egg, and he would make sure that it was hidden properly in the case that he died against the foul creature. Godzilla and Mothra watched over the egg as they were preparing for the arrival of their new Goji pup, and they were over the moon over it. They had been collecting tons upon tons of radiation in order to feed it before the child would come out after the rite of reincarnation. During the first month, both parents have been getting weird dreams about their pup's life before becoming a titan, and now they wanted to murder this person named Kachan. In these dreams they were like more memories of their pup as a human than anything else. They were surprised when they found out that his peers didn't do a thing for when it came to treating him well. They knew that their pup needed all the attention they could get before entering that school he talked about with his mother in these dreams, but that would require a few more months of training to be completed as soon as his egg hatched. It was near the 5th month that Goji and Mothra were getting antsy about why the egg wasn't hatching. Thoughts about whether they accidentally crushed the life form inside the egg crossed their minds many times. That was until the egg flaps opened up on top. As they watched as a small Gojira was climbing out of the egg, they cooed at how it crawled on all fours like a lizard. It then looked around itself as if trying to figure out what was going on before seemingly noticing their presence and looking up. It was a surprise to be sure when they saw the dark marks covering his cheeks as if they were freckles, as well as the piercing jade eyes staring into their blue, as well as Mothra's blue eyes as well. Moving his face downward, Godzilla placed his maw near the baby's maw as he connected to the child on a telepathic level. "Oh my God, what happened to me? I can't believe that I look like you. Do I call you Dad, and Mom, what do I do?" The little Gojira's mind scrambled to think as it thought it was thinking to itself. Godzilla and Mothra chuckled in their grunts and soft roars as the little Gojira startled and looked up at them. "You can call us anything you want, pup. You are our child now, a child of Mother Earth," Godzilla said, as Mothra looked down at the little Gojira. Goji was correct in his little assumption about what you would do as soon as awakening. Mothra giggled, as the little Gojira looked up. "Who or why you?" he asked, his little tail wagging all the while. "My name is Mothra, but the Japanese people of Monarch call me Mothra." "Nice to meet you, Izuku," Mothra said, as she stared at Izuku before transforming into a humanoid form. Godzilla did the same as Izuku followed suit as they became their human counterparts, Godzilla looking like an Olympian god who was ready for battle, as Mothra looked as if she was a goddess of Greece. Mothra's human form had long blonde, white hair that extended to her upper back as her fluff from her moth form had centered itself around her chest and lower neck. Her eyes were an orange-black color for her pupils as they showed her moth form in them. Looking at Izuku, she found that his form looked similar to Godzilla's except for the missing blade, as well as her eyes of what he looked like as a titan. "Nice to formally meet you, Izuku Midoriya. I am Mothra, Queen of the Monsters," Mothra said, introducing herself. Izuku looked completely confused as he then bowed to her as she giggled at his formality. "Don't do that, little pup. You will be the heir to the throne as the next in line to become Godzilla," Goji said, as he huffed. Izuku looked at them before feeling something growing out of his back and looked to see that his form had large spines like a stegosaurus and his tail had the coloring as well as some fluff from his titan mother. As he stared at his surroundings now, he noticed that there was a skeleton nearby that seemed similar to an old enemy of Godzilla. Is that Anguirus?" Izuku asked, pointing at the skeleton. "Nope, that was his far distant relative though. It was Ankylogyrus," Godzilla said, ruffling Izuku's now more fluffy hair. "You wish to become a hero, correct, son?" Godzilla asked, incredibly serious. "Yes, more than anything. But even after All Might stopped that dream from becoming true with his words. I still wish to become one, even if it is as an underground hero," Izuku said, as Mothra stated something. "You know, with your appearance, you could be mistaken as a mutated human being with a quirk. You can breathe atomic rays like your father and have the power over electricity like Ghidorah. But most importantly, you could reincarnate yourself should your old form, which is what you are now, and transform into your Titan self," Mothra said, as she let Izuku think about this. "Wait. So you mean that I am effectively immortal?" Izuku asked, as Mothra looked at him. "Not exactly. Should your egg, if you lay one nearby, be destroyed, you will die, but it will take almost 100 years before you could reincarnate with your powers," Mothra said, as Izuku nodded his head. We will be getting you to learn how to fight with your Titan form as well as human form to be completely prepared for your first year as a hero student. But above all else, you will need to hold yourself back in order to make sure that you don't kill anyone on accident. This training you will be doing will increase your base power and strength with your current abilities and bring them higher than ever. Godzilla said, as Izuku nodded. I need to get stronger so that I can become a hero for everyone. I will bring smiles to people's faces, just like All Might did. But I won't tell someone that their dreams are unattainable or tell them to be realistic. I will encourage them to become heroes even if the people around them tell them not to. Izuku declared as Godzilla got into a fighting stance. Then get prepared for 5 months of pure torture, because by the end of these 5 months, you will be as strong as I was at your age when I was in the Hollow Earth battling for supremacy against the Kongs. Godzilla said, rushing his son. Over the last 5 months, Izuku had been training in order to become a hero at UA. He had also been getting abilities to be added to his repertoire from Mothra. He was walking around the lost city of Atlantis when a submarine entered the area and humans were making their way through it. Thinking quickly, Izuku entered his Titan form as he hid from them. He had no clue as to who or what they were or why they were here, but he needed to be hidden from them. From what the radiation signal is stating, there was a smaller life form within the chambers that Godzilla lives and sleeps in. An old voice called out, "Are you sure, Rick? Last time I checked, Godzilla was highly territorial, especially to us." A female voice called out. It was here that Izuku revealed himself as he stomped over to them as he had grown to be as tall as Godzilla was in the 1950s at around 50 meters tall. They all stared at him with confusion before stating something that was correct on all fronts. Did he have a child? They all screamed. They all started to slowly but surely move away from Izuku as he moved closer to them on all fours. This is a discovery of a lifetime. We need to talk to Dr. Serizawa about this. He will be happy to find out that Godzilla has been procreating a newer version of his species. The female said, as Izuku got annoyed as he grabbed the woman softly. As he lifted her to his eyes, she couldn't help but notice how curious he was about her as well as how expressive they were. They also seemed to have another form in them as she got a closer look and took a picture. "See, could you put me down, little Gojira?" she asked, concerned for her safety. Izuku, being the nice person that he was, placed her down softly as he moved along with them, getting on all fours and lowering himself to their height. What do you think he's doing?" one of the men asked, as Izuku stared at them expectantly. I think he wishes to give us a ride," one of the scientist men said, as he climbed on top of Izuku's back holding onto his spines. The others had then grabbed onto his spines and activated their pressurized suits in order to protect themselves from the pressures of the ocean water. They had also taken to heart that this Godzilla child had gills on his neck as well, same as his father. They were pleasantly surprised to find out that they were being swam out of the radiation-filled area and back to the surface. Once the Monarch station that was there had noticed his presence, they had prepared for another Ghidorah situation but found that to be impossible since Izuku was the only one there with their people. A man came out of the massive station as he had a shocked look on his face as the people and woman walked over to the man. What is this? How did Godzilla have another version of his species?" the man asked, almost hysterically laughing. "It is as you said, sir, he managed to have a child with Mothra," the woman said, as Izuku huffed in his Titan form as he rose up to be at their eyesight level on the station. Looking at his presence, the man who arrived on the scene walked over to Izuku's face as he could remember what Godzilla looked like in his heyday. "Look at you, are you the child of Godzilla and Mothra?" he asked, curiously as Izuku nodded. "Why, you can understand us?" he asked, bewildered. Another nod confirmed his suspicions as the man stared at him concerned. Izuku, thinking nothing of what he was going to do, connected his mind to that of the man as he felt a tingle down his spine as Izuku's eyes glowed. "Are you Dr. Serizawa?" Izuku asked, as the man looked floored as he looked at everyone else. "Are you talking to me, little Goji?" the man asked and received a nod. "I am Dr. Ishiro Serizawa, and I am the director of Monarch. I hope to know what happened to such a being like you to be born," the man asked. "My name is Midoriya Izuku, or I should say Gosira. I am the child of Godzilla and Mothra. Sorry, I have an identity crisis whenever I am in this form. But I am Izuku Midoriya as a human. I was born human but entered a rite of reincarnation because I had Gaia's gift within my body. Izuku said, as the man looked at him confused. Your name is Gosira, a mix of Godzilla, Gojira and Mothra, Mizura. Magnificent. A mix between different breeds, Serizawa said, as he laughed before running off. Tearing the connection with him and the giant titan behind him in the process, he made his way into the building inside the station to add a new titan on the charts of others. I think that you just made his day there, the woman said, as she stared at Izuku's confused expression. My name is Vivian Graham, and I am Serizawa's second in command of Monarch. It's nice to meet you, little Goji, she said, as she held out a left hand. Izuku pointed his finger at her as she gripped it tightly as she tried to shake it, only to be lifted off the ground as Izuku shook hers. After a large amount of clicks as well as groans, Izuku had to leave since he could feel his father's presence calling him back to Atlantis. As soon as he disappeared from the area, Monarch had gotten together in order to keep an eye on the young titan as he traversed through the waters. I can only hope that this youngster can become an even better Godzilla than his father, Serizawa stated, as he stared at the number of Gojiras he had placed on his wall. That only being 3 that he could place. Dagon, Godzilla himself, and Izuku. Smiling to himself, he gears himself up to head to Japan in order to tell the Japanese government about what happened to the missing boy Midoriya Izuku. The whole way there, Izuku was struggling with keeping his mentality correct as he was trying to not let either personality of his Titan form and human form get the better of the other. As soon as he arrived in Atlantis, he transformed back into his humanoid form as his father walked over to him in his Titan form. Izuku stood up as tall as he could from where he was as his hair was ruffled by the big G-man. Said man was picking Izuku up now as he was about to get a massive quantity of radiation to eat from the earth. Once that was completed, Godzilla had looked to his son as he made a face that meant that something was wrong. What is wrong? Izuku asked, as Gojira stared him in the eye. You need to find your champion, Gojira said. Kachan. Let's become heroes together, a younger Izuku said, happily running through a forest. Don't make me laugh, Deku. You aren't even worthy of becoming my sidekick. You're quirkless, Kachan said, angrily. Stop, slow down Kachan. Izuku called out, as his small legs tried their best in order to catch up to his friend. The squad of kids had arrived at a small underpass of wood and logs as Kachan had begun to make his way across the wet log from the rain they had the previous night. Kachan, you should be careful on wet things, Izuku said, looking worried. I don't need you to say that, Deku, I'm far better. Kachan couldn't finish his words as he slipped from the log and into the small creek. As Kachan had landed on his butt, he started to sniffle since it really hurt his backside, but as his friends asked if he was all right from afar, he screamed out that he was fine. He was about to get up when Izuku was running down the small slope to get to him. Kachan. The little boy screamed, worry written all over his face. Running up to his seemingly hurt friend, Izuku placed a hand out to help him up. Are you okay? Izuku asked, as Kachan looked at his hand for a moment before swatting it away. Don't look down on me, Deku. I'm far better than you, Kachan said, shoving him to the ground and running off. Wait. Don't leave me, Kachan, Izuku said, running after the blonde-haired boy. Gasp. Asterisk. Izuku breathed in a whole lot of air from the memory. Getting up from where he was lying on the ground, Izuku moved around the place in his Titan form as he shook some water off his body. Looking around the place, he soon found out that it was empty. Sighing softly, he moved towards where the water was in order to move through the waterways in order to make it to the surface. When he surfaced, the Monarch facility had noticed the water placement moving about as they looked out towards the water and saw Izuku surface above the water before looking in different directions. It had been a few months since his first appearance to the facility and he had grown exponentially. His height in his Titan form was now just 100 meters below his father, and he was guaranteed to grow to be as tall as him or just slightly shorter than him. Looking around the ocean as well as the facility, he saw that Dr. Serizawa had moved towards where he was floating aimlessly at the moment. Izuku, is there something wrong? You seem to be having a nightmare. Serizawa asked, concerned. Moving his hand to where the platform was, Izuku transformed into his human form as he walked over to the man and sat down near him. He had come to view him as a second father and had gotten close to him enough that he would allow him to pet his head. Just some memory from my life as a 4-year-old, and nothing too bad. I got my entrance exams today at UA. Did you hear about what happened to Dad and Mom? Izuku asked, as Serizawa looked at him softly. They're still in the Hollow Earth discussing terms of peace between them and Kong. I don't know what it is about, but they are rehashing some terms of agreement, Serizawa said, petting the boy's head. I got to head out. Wish me luck? Izuku asked, looking at the man. I wish you the best of luck. As well for the opponents you will be going up against. The man said, chuckling as Izuku jumped into the ocean. As he transformed into his Titan form and swam to the shore, Serizawa made sure to contact Ua that a certain kaiju's son was making his way over to their school. About 5 hours later, since it was around 5 o'clock in the morning at the beach, Izuku had made landfall as he transformed into his human form. Looking at his reflection, Izuku saw that his eyes gained a hue of blue and orange within his jade-colored eyes. His hair had still been messy like usual, but it gained some blue tips at the edge of his forest green color. He walked over to the steps as he made his way towards the school of his dreams. Before he became a Titan, he wouldn't need to rely on food as much nowadays since he could consume radiation in order to survive, but that didn't matter to him. He had an entrance exam to win as well as pass in order to learn how to become a hero. When he arrived to the school in question, Izuku saw that the sun was now up high in the air as it placed a beam of light over the school. This is the first step I have to become a hero, Izuku said, as a gruff and angry voice called out behind him. Watch it, lizard face. As Izuku froze for a minute-second, he turned to look at the boy who he hadn't heard in about 10 months. The boy was revealed to be blonde-haired as well as ruby-eyed young man who had a sneer on his face as he looked at Izuku. So, what are you doing here, Deku? The boy asked, as Izuku visibly shook a little before shaking his head. Whoever gets the most points has to buy the other's lunch, Izuku said, holding his hand out. From the boy's view, Izuku had changed from a timid boy who was trembling in his presence alone, but the boy in front of him now had the backbone that he had tried to pull out of him for years. About damn time you grew a backbone, Deku, but at least make sure you can keep your promises. I thought you were quirkless, the boy said, rather mellowly. I became a Titan because of the energy I somehow absorbed from Godzilla and Ghidorah, Kacchan. Izuku said, as Kacchan nodded his head. Well, I will show you why you are a useless Deku. And make sure to rub it in your face by then as well, Kacchan said, as Izuku sighed in relief. From the last time they had talked to one another, they had been polar opposites, and Kacchan had been wishing to attack him at any moment. After a few minutes of waiting for the entrance exam's written portion to begin, Izuku was writing answers for the test. It wasn't until around 30 minutes later that Izuku had finished the test as he left the room, leaving his test on his desk since the teacher had noticed his movement stopped. Izuku entered a room with some other examinees as they waited for the proctor of the exam to talk about the practical portion of the test. About 25 minutes after everyone was gathered into the auditorium, a man with raised blonde hair and shades covering his eyes stepped up to the podium. Hello everyone, and welcome to UA Academy. Can I get a yeah? He called out and placed a hand over his ear. Silence reigned over the auditorium as the man shuddered at how quiet it was. You are no joke. Well, let's start on explaining the rules to the entrance exams. Are you ready? He asked in complete hyping of the explanation. He got silence once more as Izuku in his seat started to gush about how the man on the stage is Present Mike, as well as how he used to listen to his talk show every Friday night. Kacchan had promptly told him to shut up, and as soon as he quieted down, Present Mike began to talk about the 1 to 3 pointer robots in quick succession. Excuse me. I have a question, a navy blue-haired boy with a ramrod straight stance yelled out, raising his hand. What can I do for you, examinee number 7111, Present Mike called out. On the pamphlet here, it clearly states that there are 4 robots that we have to defeat, but you have only talked about the previous 3. If this is a mistake on behalf of UA's information department, then that is highly disrespectful of a building to do that, the young man said, as Present Mike placated him. All right, don't get your panties in a bunch, examinee number 7111, that is the 0 pointer. It is worth exactly as it is called. 0 points. Zilch, nada. That is basically a thwomp from Super Mario Bros. It is a mere obstacle as well as if you attack it you will lose all your points. Present Mike called back to the student, thank you for your answer. Now as for you the one with forest messy hair. If you are only here to gush about heroes, then you should leave. We do not need your incessant muttering to distract us from trying to pass the test. The boy said, as Izuku clamped his mouth shut as Kachan laughed from afar. Alright, cool your jets there. Examinee number 7111. Now that is all I have to say other than this one phrase. As Napoleon once said, true heroes are capable of overcoming all obstacles. And with that I will leave you with our school's motto, plus ultra. Present Mike called out, as Izuku moved out towards the area he was going to be at. At the arena that he was going to attend, Izuku stood off to the side as he stretched his body out and cracking some bones that needed to be popped. As soon as he gained a feral smirk on his face, he watched as the doors began to open up as Present Mike got ready to start the countdown. But as soon as the doors were completely opened, Izuku ran off as some of the other students made similar comments about how he would be disqualified for going before the sound went off. But as Present Mike didn't start the countdown, a brown-haired girl, examinee number 7111, and a couple of others followed Izuku's example as they went into the arena to take down bots. It wasn't much longer when the other students were told that there was no goes for fighting villains and told them all to get points before there isn't any more to collect. With all the other students running into the city now to get points, Izuku was seen running around and beating down robots with his base strength as he trashed any that came up to him. His dorsal plates on his back were pulsating as they were showing his intimidation display. That makes my 20th point, Izuku said, destroying a 2-pointer. Within a monitor room, a group of judges were watching a few cameras placed in each zone as they watched the children fight the robots. It seems like we have a great crop this year, a woman said, as she licked her lips. That boy with the dorsal plates, is he who we're supposed to keep an eye on? A man with an excavator helmet over his head asked. Yes, he is the son of the king of the monsters. We are to make sure that he doesn't fall to villainy. But at the same time, we are supposed to make sure that he can pass the overall exam. A small rodent-like creature said, smiling. The other cameras had shown other applicants who were showing their prowess in fighting the bots as they took them down each. Hell, there was an invisible girl who was taking down some of the robots by turning them off, with her invisibility being a really good advantage. How long has it been since the exam had started? A sickly-looking man asked. It's been exactly about 7 minutes. Let's send out the 0-pointers. A scraggly-haired man said, as the creature who was watching with them pushed the button. 2. Izuku was having a blast at the moment. He had saved a few people from decisions that would have gotten them hurt, but at the same time he was destroying these bots without issues. He was really glad to have Godzilla's anatomy for destruction since he was really able to let loose without training with his dad. It was here that he gained his 79th point, and the ground started to rumble and shake as if there was an earthquake. Well, if it isn't a problem, I should see if there is anyone who needs help, Izuku said, as he ran towards the main street of the arena. He saw a bunch of people running about as they were fleeing from the massive gargantuan robot that was destroying buildings. Izuku began to walk towards the massive robot with a smirk on his face as his alpha instincts were beginning to declare that he needed to make it submit. Moving forwards, he noticed how there was a girl who was about to be crushed by rubble, and he moved as fast as he could, and as the girl noticed the rocks above her, she covered her head waiting for something to land on her. When nothing did, she opened her eyes and saw a massive creature standing above her and holding the rocks above her body. Placing the rocks over to the right, he gave her a nod as the girl ran away from the location as Izuku's transformed state showed how beautiful his dorsal plates were on his back. Glowing with each plate, from his tail to his head, Izuku moved towards the robot intent on fully destroying it. The robot had only managed to reach up to his upper thigh in terms of height, and he was only around 99 meters tall. Izuku grabbed the metal robot as his tail began to glow from the plates there and began to make a thrumming sound. The sound got louder and louder as Izuku's body began to glow green in color as if to show that he was about to use an attack that would be devastating. If that wasn't enough, the 0-pointer was calling for backup since it was identifying Izuku as such a massive threat that it wished for backup to take him down. But just before the last mayday call for the robot was about to be sent out, Izuku held the robot by its face and lifted it to stare him in the eyes as he tossed it in the air and released his breath towards it. The thrumming came to a halt as he released his built-up power and smashed it into the robot, sending it high in the air as it was pushed higher and higher into orbit. Everyone in each and every arena were looking at the sky as well as Izuku's general direction as they watched a zero-pointer be completely obliterated and tossed into the atmosphere. As soon as the beam of green light had dissipated, Izuku stood over a small hill of dead robots as he roared out into the heavens. As he shook his head, he started to lower his body to the ground as he started to glow green again, causing everyone to run away thinking that he would attack them. But as soon as the green glow ended, Izuku was revealed in his human form as he shook his body as multiple sections of his body was covered in ash as well as dust. It was here that the exams were ended as Izuku made his way over to the girl he had saved from the rocks. When she saw him, she ran over to make sure that he was all right, but that was when she noticed his dorsal plates on his back. Why you're Godzilla? She called out fearfully. And no, I'm not him. I'm sort of his adopted son. Izuku asked, as the girl stared at him for a moment before promptly passing out. The others around him stared at him as Izuku picked the girl up and moved to get her to Recovery Girl, thinking that she was in need of some healing. All right children, let me take a look at your injuries. Come on, I don't have all day. Recovery Girl called out, as she kissed and moved on from person to person. As soon as she came up to Izuku and the sleeping girl, Izuku placed her on the ground as he told her what happened as the woman just sighed. She passed out from quirk exhaustion, as well as too much information. I will need some help getting her to the infirmary, Sonny, Recovery Girl said, as Izuku picked the girl up from the ground and followed the old woman to her office. As soon as the trio had entered the room, Recovery Girl gave Izuku some gummies as she told him to prepare for a letter to come to his home. I don't exactly have a home. See, could you send it to the Monarch base on the ocean at this exact location? Izuku asked, using a map to point in its general location. I could get Nezu to do that, yes. I hope to never see you in my office in the future. She said, as Izuku looked a little glum now. I don't think that is possible. Izuku said, as he moved towards the door. Why would you think that, Sonny? She asked, as Izuku told her about what he did to the zero-pointer. Well, if it makes you feel better, I think you were a hero to the few people who you assisted. She said, smiling at him. He only returned a sad smile before leaving through the door as he walked down the hallways. It wasn't long until he left that the girl woke up as she felt extremely warm. What happened? She asked. Izuku had been so sullen that he forgot to go with that dinner with Kacchan as he left the school grounds. It was about 3 years before Izuku was entering the world of the Titans that he can see himself in this dream. He was walking to school, and it was around the first day of school for his first year of middle school. He had been minding his own business as he entered the school gates as he prepared for his day. He was walking through the halls as he made his way towards his classroom for the next year, and as entering the room he heard the distinct sounds of crackling pops right behind himself. Turning around, he was soon face to face with Kacchan as the young man stared him down with a fury that was borderlining on villainous actions about to be done. What the hell are you doing here, Deku? Kacchan asked, as Izuku stared at him in fear. Just heading to Class S. Izuku said, stepping back away from the boy in clear fear. I was supposed to come to this worthless school and leave it to enter UA, why are you constantly following me? Kacchan called out, attacking Izuku. Izuku was smashed in the stomach as he was sent flying across the room and smacked into the wall behind himself as he grabbed his stomach. A girl ran over to him to make sure he was all right and looked at his pained expression. Are you all right? She asked, as Izuku looked up. She had long black hair that was stylized like midnight as she stared at him with cerulean-colored orbs. Unknown to her, behind her Kacchan was rearing an arm back to explode her back for helping him. Izuku pushed her out of the way as the searing hot pain of an explosion of nitroglycerin-like sweat impacting his form and exploding. Gya! Izuku screamed as he flinched from his dreams and landed on the ground. Izuku moved towards the ocean water as he felt the phantom pain of his chest burning as he transformed into his Titan form. He swam towards the surface of the ocean where the Monarch base was located on the ocean when one of the scientists had run over to the edge where Izuku was located and helped him up. "Are you all right, Izuku?" the scientist asked concerned. Izuku looked up and found her wearing a scientist's similar garb as well as long beautiful blonde hair with glasses that made her eyes stand out. Sorry. I didn't mean to cause any harm," Izuku mumbled as he rubbed his chest. The woman pulled him towards the infirmary as she started to work on his burn scar that was still flaring up. She had been told about his past as well as who made the burns, and she had been his primary doctor ever since. Her name was Melissa Shield. She had a knack for building and crafting support gear for heroes but made a minor in getting a doctor's degree. She placed some burn cream on his chest as she helped him place the bandages over his chest. She had known him for about a few months now as she was near his age range enough to care for him. Izuku whimpered as the memories of that traumatizing event in his life had caused him to sort of relapse as he was trying to get the memory to subside. Another scientist had entered the room to find him being cared for by Melissa as they cooed softly. "I came here to ask why he was here, but now I see why," Vivian said, smiling sadly. Burn scar had been burning in his sleep. He was having a memory of a past event that happened in school. Melissa said, as Izuku nodded, whimpering still. "Don't worry, that young man can't hurt you anymore," Vivian said, as she smiled at him. "Now you have a first day of school to go to. You are in class 1A. Since you won the entrance exams of the year," Vivian said, smiling at him. How did I pass? I was sure that my points were redacted since I had destroyed the 0-pointer," Izuku said, as the woman giggled softly. "Only you can be this one-dimensional in terms of heroism. You silly goose, you didn't lose any points. In fact, that 0-pointer was worth 60 points all on its own," Melissa said, giggling. "Oh, so what time should I be heading over to the school?" Izuku asked, as the two girls stared at him. "It's already around 6:30, you have about an hour to get there if you move it," Vivian said, as Izuku got up and moved away to head to school. "Thank you all, especially you Mel," Izuku said, as Melissa nodded. Izuku was now entering the beach of Dagoba as he was moving about the cleared beach. He had noticed that a small group of people were cleaning it up and he smiled every time he saw the clean beach. But now was not the time for reminiscing. He had to get to school before he was too late. Changing back to his human form, he moved towards the street and revealed that he fit the human suit and tie for the school uniform perfectly. He was walking towards the school when he overheard a sound coming from behind him and found a young girl with brown hair moving towards him with a speed he had only seen from All Might and Ingenium. "Hey, are you Godzilla's little brother?" she yelled as she finally caught up to him. "You No, I'm his son," Izuku said, confused as well as concerned. "Well, it's nice to meet you. I'm Ochako Uraraka. Thank you for saving me at the entrance exams," Uraraka said, smiling at him. "It's nothing. You don't have to repay me if that is what you're thinking. I just did what any hero should do, nothing more, nothing less," Izuku said, as they both entered the school grounds. They arrived at the door to their class really fast, especially since Uraraka had been riding on his tail during the walk. She had gotten tired out since she had sprinted all the way there and was needing a break. Izuku had been a little miffed when she used his tail as a rest stop, but he didn't mind. Entering the classroom, they were bombarded with the navy-haired boy yelling at Kacchan as if he was offending him. "For the last time, take your feet off the desk. It will be seen as disrespecting the people and teachers who spent their time to creating it," the boy said as he chopped his hand in the air. "What are you, an elitist? What school did you come from?" Kacchan asked, as Izuku became very worried. "Let me reintroduce myself. I am Iida Tenya from Sumei Private Academy." Iida Tenya introduced himself. "Bakugo Katsuki, and I am going to enjoy beating you into the ground," Kacchan said, as he growled at the boy. Beat me. Are you sure that you belong in this conglomerate of a school?" Iida called out, before Izuku coughed, suddenly gaining their attention. "Deku," Bakugo growled. Sorry about interrupting. Geez, how do I talk to people again?" Izuku mumbled to himself as Ochako got off his tail. "Hello there, my name is Iida Tenya." Iida began to speak as Izuku interrupted him again. "Sorry for the interruption, but I should probably get to my seat because the teacher is here," and my name is Midoriya Izuku. Nice to meet you, Iida. And I already heard you speaking to Kak Bakugo, Izuku said, as he walked over to his seat. I'm surprised that you noticed my presence. Well, at least I don't have to reveal myself for another minute and a half. My name is Shota Aizawa, and I will be your homeroom teacher for the next 3 years. I'm sure that you have things you want to be doing at the start of the year, but put these on and meet me outside, Aizawa said, as he walked out of the room and entered his cocoon of a sleeping bag and rolled away. I think he just reminded me that I should get Skyla a new sleeping bag. I wonder if he would allow me to know where he gets that. Izuku mumbled as the others looked at him horrified. As the class were standing outside, the teacher made a remark about how they took about close to 35 seconds and that he would work on that in the future. Midoriya, you scored first in the entrance exams. What was the furthest you could throw a ball in middle school? Aizawa asked, looking at the titan of a boy. Last I checked. About 35 meters, sir, Izuku said, looking down. Before you became a titan or after? The man asked, looking at him with a deadpanned expression. Before, Izuku said, curtly. Well, make sure to use your quirk. And make sure that you don't leave the circle, Aizawa said, as he tossed Izuku a ball. Wait, he got first. All the members of the class called out. Izuku moved into the circle as he wrapped his tail around his legs in order to keep it within the circle. I will place all my strength into this, and make sure that I don't break any glass nearby. Izuku thought to himself as he remembered what his teacher said. By the way, Aizawa-sensei. I don't have a quirk, Izuku screamed out the last word as the ball flew out of his hand and off in the distance. Multiple shockwaves of wind were blown at everyone as they held onto each other in order to keep themselves from being blown away. Alright, you all need to know where your estimates are really at when using your quirks. The system thinks that it can still believe that all men are treated equally, but they are just holding off on it. This will test your true strengths at the use of your quirks as well as how to improve them. Aizawa said, as he revealed Izuku's number. It was revealed to be around 50,000 meters away from them. Holy shit. 50,000 meters. How are we supposed to compete with that? An electric blonde-haired boy called out, how the hell does Deku have a quirk? He was quirkless all his life. I will show him the place he deserves to be at my feet. Katsuki growled at Izuku's returning form. Well, let's get this started. Moving on from that demonstration is the 50-meter dash. Aizawa said, before someone opened their big mouth. If that is how this is going to be, this will be a lot of fun. A pink-skinned and haired girl said, jumping around. Fun, you say? Aizawa said, looking at the students who looked at him in slight fear, minus Izuku. Well, if you think that this will be fun, how about this little challenge for you all to complete? If you all don't take this as seriously as possible, I will expel the one person who is in last place. And you will have to leave the school in order to find a new school to go to. Aizawa said, as Uraraka called him out. Why, you can't just do that. We just got here. We worked really hard to get to where we are. That isn't fair, Ochako said, looking at the teacher. And what about disasters? Landslides, tornadoes, hurricanes, etc. You all are training to become heroes, and I have 3 years to make sure that you last longer than most heroes out there today. If you don't pass this test, you will be expelled. End of discussion. Aizawa said, as everyone moved over to the next test. The tests for the quirk apprehension test went smoothly, if you could call it that. Everyone was doing their best to get top scores as well as not be outed as expelled. Izuku was doing fairly well as he was getting constant top 3s on the leaderboards in terms of control as well as power. The main reason he wasn't getting the top scores was because of the fact that he would be slower in his Titan form, since that caused his mind to nearly break every time he became it, since there was a personality shift each time. He got second place on the 50-meter dash, second on the grip, third on the sideways jumps, third in the crunches, first in the push-ups, and third place consecutively for the last 3 events. It was here that their teacher looked over at them as he gave the scores for those on the leaderboards. Izuku was placed in third place as Aizawa talked about not going over each and every student so that he doesn't get a headache from reading so much. As soon as the leaderboard was revealed, Izuku was happy about his placement as the last place person was revealed to be a Minoru Mineta. And as soon as said boy saw that he was in last place, he screamed out in fear that he was going to be expelled before he could even create a harem for himself. But as soon as that was stated, Izuku moved closer to the girls as he covered them all with his tail defensively. He didn't know why he did that, but it felt right to block them away from the little bastard as he attempted to jump at the tallest girl in the class with grabby hands. But as soon as he was close to the woman, she began to create something before the boy was grabbed by a clawed hand. Everyone looked over to see what grabbed the boy, only to see Izuku's jade eyes glowing a vibrant orange as he stared the little bastard in the eye. "You will take your expelling with dignity and leave without being told to." When the teacher said that he was going to expel someone, he wasn't lying. Izuku said, as he held the boy in the air, "Right as I said, Midoriya. But please don't do my job for me, Mineta. Leave the area and never come back again. I will be placing a black mark on your file for attempted sexual assault." Aizawa said, as Mineta ran off crying about telling his parents about this. As soon as the boy was out of earshot, Izuku's eyes became jade-colored once more as he turned to his class and apologized for the over-the-top attitude. "Don't worry, he was making comments about our bodies the entire time," Ochako said, as some of the other girls nodded their heads in agreement. Izuku followed the rest of the class at the rear in order to prevent anyone else from peeping on the girls as they made their way over to the locker rooms. But it was here that Izuku smelled the little pissant who was hiding inside the locker rooms as Izuku called the girls out. "Girls!" Izuku yelled, gaining their attention. "What is it, Midoriya-san?" The tall girl asked, concerned. "I'm sorry for how this sounds, but I need to enter the room really quick. There is a pissant who should have left by now in there hiding." Izuku growled at the door, as the girls nodded and moved out of the way. Izuku continued to smell for the pungent odor that he was catching and followed it to Ochako's locker, and he gripped the locker door and pulled it off the hinges, causing a loud shriek to be heard within. While the girls on the outside could hear the shriek, they overheard the sounds of thrumming from inside the room and went to investigate the issue. They all saw Izuku cornering Mineta with his dorsal plates thrumming with power as he growled at the small boy as he pissed himself. "Girls, call Aizawa-sensei. I will keep the little bastard here." Izuku growled as most of the girls left the room except for Ochako. Looking at her locker, she found white fluid sitting on her uniform as she was completely disgusted with the clothes now. "Why, you jacked off on my clothes?" she screeched, clearly in anger. Izuku, hearing this, was both angered but at the same time confused, since he had never heard of what that phrase jacking off meant in his life. He had learned about the male anatomy in school during health class, but his teacher said that his was completely wrong for being a quirkless, meaning that he was infertile. So he never really had a reason to play with himself, so hearing a new way of saying it caused him confusion, but he kept growling at the boy to keep him still. "I was kicked out of the hero course. What did you expect me to do? Just sit there and twiddle my thumbs when I have a whole buffet of beautiful women at my beck and call?" The little boy screeched. "Just for that, I feel like I should atomize you. Women are not for screwing. They are meant to be friends, allies, and maybe even more through building a relationship. They are not meant to be used as, what's that word I'm looking for?" Izuku growled back at the boy before losing the words that he wanted to say. "A fuck toy?" Ochako asked, concerned. "Yeah, that. Women are to be treated as how you wish to be treated. If you wish to be treated like an equal to them, you are to act like a normal teen and not be a hormonal piece of crud who only looks at their chests and rears," Izuku said, and Ochako was now feeling a little blush building up. Izuku's skin was starting to turn red as he was becoming more and more furious with the little shit in front of himself. It was here that Aizawa arrived at the room, kicking the door down, quite literally, and ran over to where he could feel an intense heat coming from Izuku. "Midoriya, calm down and move away from Mineta," Aizawa said, as Izuku looked at the teacher as he had his eyes red and staring at him. "Sure thing, Aizawa-sensei. Can I ask the principal to make sure that Uraraka-san can get a new uniform?" Izuku asked, as the teacher nodded his head. With that, Izuku and Ochako left the room and left the diminutive boy to his fate against their teacher. The duo was walking over to the principal's office as Ochako was silent about the encounter of Izuku and the perverted boy in her locker. Hey, thank you for stopping him. If I opened my locker, I probably would have been violated by him when us girls were changing in there," Ochako said, as Izuku looked over at her. She also noticed that one of his eyes had been red in color as he slowly shook his head, getting his anger and fury down enough to speak. "No, it's fine. and anyone else could have noticed his presence in there. Jiro. I think that was her name? The girl with the earphone jacks for ears? Izuku asked the girl as Ochako nodded. She could basically hear his heartbeat as well as breathing if she tried hard enough. I could smell him because of my extremely heightened sense of smell. His smell was so horrible that I had to stay away from him at all times at the tests outside. Izuku explained as she noticed his solemn look. Are you feeling sorry for him? Ochako asked, concerned. It's probably my heroic heart that my mother told me about, but I can't just help but to go seek out to help people with their own problems. It just makes me feel happy when I can save people. I believe that a true hero is someone who will save you no matter what the situation or circumstances are. Izuku said, as they finally arrived at the door. As soon as Izuku was about to knock on the door, it opened up to reveal a somewhat furious man talking to the principal as the said principal's fur was bristling. For the last time, Nezu, you are to expel that dorsal platted brat immediately. The man screamed at the principal. And how many times do I have to tell you, Mr. Mineta, that your son had tried to get his hands on multiple women at my school in just the starting hours of the day? Then when he was expelled for misconduct with the women in his classroom, he hides in Uraraka-san's locker and as she said herself jacked off all over her clothes and now wishes to get a new uniform, correct? Nezu asked as he stared at the two new arrivals. Why yeah. Izuku said, as Ochako nodded her head. Well, the clothes are right next to me. I had a feeling that this would happen, so here you go. Nezu said, as Ochako walked next to the creature of a principal. Thank you, principal, I should get going now, Ochako said, running off in fear. Izuku continued into the room as he closed the door behind himself. Now that Uraraka-san is out of the area, how about we talk about your misconduct, Mr. Mineta-san? Nezu said, as Izuku's dorsal plates released a glow in the room as Izuku growled at the man. Why isn't he being punished? I am a part of the UA Board of Teachers. I demand that my son be given his chance to become a hero. The man called out, as Izuku looked at the man with scrutiny. Sir, all due respect, that I won't be able to give to you at the moment. Your son had explicitly stated multiple times on the field that he would love to. And I quote, I would love to fuck that girl with the big tits and fuck the girl with the nice ass. And I was so disgusted with his wording that I feel like I'm about to vomit right now for saying it. Izuku said, as he stared at the man angrily. That was perfectly good for a quote Midoriya shonen. Now, what do you have to say now for your son's safety within our prestigious academy? Nezu asked as the man shot up with a gun and pointed it at Izuku. Faster than anyone could react, the man shot his gun to Izuku's head as the gun's barrel had smoke coming out of it. But just as the man was grinning in his victory, a tail slapped him into the seat, as Nezu crawled over him and placed a quirk suppression cuff over his wrists. You Mr. Mineta-san are hereby under arrest for the attempted murder of the son of the king of the monsters. Nezu said, as the man looked at Izuku's dorsal plates with fury as well as fear. Then he saw that Izuku caught the bullet with his teeth, and Izuku's teeth then crunched down on the metal before spitting both pieces of the bullet out onto the floor. I should probably leave, Nezu-san, huh? Izuku asked, as the principal nodded as he left through the door. My son will be avenged. You hear me? The man screamed as Izuku walked down the hallway to go to his homeroom class. Izuku woke up from his encounter with Kacchan with a massive migraine. He was nearly at the end of elementary school in the final year. He had been trying to get the boy to stop attacking others in favor of attacking him instead. He had always wanted to be a hero since he learned about them as a 4-year-old. He was on his way home after a particularly bad beating from the explosive boy as he rubbed his arm in slight pain as a burning sensation was pounding his arm and his blood was rushing to his head. He had been hit with an explosion to the head and his brain was still rattling from the experience and had gifted him with a migraine for it. He had done nothing wrong, but apparently just walking in the same hallway as Kacchan had been enough of a wrong for the boy to outright attack in front of teachers. Izuku couldn't trust teachers anymore after that day. He just couldn't trust in them being capable of stopping a fight when it should happen. Izuku had seen Kacchan threaten the teachers with excessive force that the teachers just learned to just accept when they wouldn't allow the quirkless child to do anything else. Izuku was on his way back home when he heard the telltale signs of an explosion coming for him from behind and he tried to dodge the attack as fast as possible. But with the legs of a 9-year-old it was kind of hard. But he had managed to dodge each attack as the other boy was glaring at him with a fury that was on top of the world. "What the fuck did I tell you about dodging my attacks, Deku?" The boy screamed at his face. "Keiko-chan, see, can you please leave me alone today? Why, you'd already attacked me already. Why, you made your point," Izuku said, screaming back at the boy. Apparently, that wasn't the right choice of words, as the young bomber had launched at him once more and had landed more blows to his chest as well as lower legs. He jumped onto Izuku's 9-year-old frame as he held the boy down with just his weight alone, since Izuku hadn't really spent all that much time to training his body physically. That was when Izuku felt a burning sensation on his lower thigh as well as rear, and Izuku yelped in pain as the burning sensation was massive. Izuku woke up staring at the sky as his old burns on his left thigh and right cheek on his rear started to flare up in pain. Standing up from his small bed, he moved about the area within the radiated entrance to the hollow earth in order to fully awaken himself from his slumber. He had noticed that he was in his Titan form once again as he shook his head as a familiar voice in his head started to speak. "You should tell Dad and Mom about your nightmares. They're becoming too much to bear," a feminine voice called out. "I know, but I can't let them know. They'll try and find Kacchan and attempt to kill him," Izuku said, as the feminine voice spoke once more. "I know that you want the best for that boy, but maybe you gave your last olive branch to help him. He has wanted nothing more from you than for you to die. Is that how a friend talks to others?" The voice asked. Mom, I don't know if I can stop sending out olive branches for him to grab. I'm trying my best to be as forgiving as possible. I will continue to do so in order to protect him from himself. If he is left to his own devices for too long, villains will take advantage of his mindset," Izuku said, shaking his head. Tears were brimming at his eyes as he shook his head, remembering her voice was nice and all, but it kind of hurt when his mother's voice came out as a voice in his head that was similar to Mothra's thrumming chirps. "I have to go to school. I don't know what we will be doing for that exact class, but I believe that it has something to do with All Might," Izuku said, as he looked at the mirage of his mother as he remembers her best. When he was a 4-year-old and was viewing her as the strongest woman in his world. She was tall and skinny, a slim waist as well as a beautiful body, but overall, he just misses how soft her voice was towards him all the time. He entered the ocean waters of the Pacific as he swam towards the sandy beach of Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. As once he landed, he walked over towards the school he went to. When he arrived at the school, he found himself in his seat once more as he started to complete some assignments that were due that day. He knew that he should have done them when he got back home from school, but lately he'd been hearing his mother's voice and it had been distracting him. The classes for school were normal for the second day as they all learned more about English, science, modern art history, and many others. Once it reached the class for hero informatics, the class was brimming with excitement, and Izuku was more mellow about it. He just wishes that it wasn't All Might as a teacher for the class. As soon as the massive man entered the class and started talking about a battle training exercise, Izuku knew that Bakugo was going to see if he could fight him just to beat him down again. "Useless. Freak. Quirkless monster. Kill yourself. We don't need you here." Izuku shook those words from his memory as he moved to collect his hero suit as he left the room and entered the changing rooms. He watched as some of the other boys had been changing into their hero costumes as he slowly but surely got into his own. It was a long-sleeved muscle shirt that had padding in the chest area to prevent massive damage to his chest, combat boots that were red in color as well as steel-toed. He had gauntlets around his wrists that increased his overall power in his attacks and steel covering his claws in order to deal more massive damage. Everything except for his shoes were the color of dark green as he left the room and held his utility belt that was yellow in color to pay homage to Eraserhead that was filled with medical supplies and provisions for any kind of hero who he would team up with. As soon as he entered the room where they were going to be watching the test in, he got a good look at his classmates as he noticed a weird aura coming from one of the girls. It was the tall girl as she held a weird aura of a bat-like monster that was similar to his monster mother. It was weird because it was giving him a singing song sound that was attracting him. He kept it to himself as he paid attention to his teacher but talked to Ochako unknown to the look that the tall girl was giving him at the moment. As All Might talked about what they would be doing for the assignment, he talked about how they needed to get inside the villain's base in order to stop a bomb from going off in 10 minutes. Not too hard, but it depended on who he was teamed up with. and he couldn't help but wish to not be teamed up with Kacchan. As soon as everyone pulled a ball from the randomizer, he soon found out that he was teamed up with Ochako as she jumped onto his tail as they looked at the teams going up against one another. Alright class, the first teams to go up against one another is Team A consisting of young Bakugo and young Iida versus Team D consisting of young Midoriya and young Uraraka. Team A will be the heroes as Team D will be the villains. All Might called out, as Izuku and Ochako left the building with the bomb in tow as they were placing it on one of the roof in order to make sure that the heroes can't find it at all. Once on the roof, Izuku stared at Ochako as he decided to make a plan. Oi, mufflers, do you think worthless Deku has a quirk? Katsuki asked, looking at the engine hero student. I don't know, from what he told me was that he didn't have a quirk. But from what he did at the entrance exams he seemed to have a quirk. Iida said, as the young man stared at Bakugo. Whatever, you deal with round face while I deal with worthless Deku. Bakugo said, as he moved towards the building. As he moved about the building after All Might told him that he can go, he looked in each and every room that he came across as he thought about what Izuku had done over the last 10 months. He had told the boy to kill himself in the last year they had at Aldera, and thought he had when the Titans attacked Musudafu and heard that the Runt and his mother were in the area of the attack. He remembers laughing at how Deku probably kicked the bucket finally and would leave him alone for when he enters UA only to find him there 10 months later. Now he will get some answers about how he developed this quirk of his and force him to use its full force to make sure that he isn't lying about how he never had this power until about 10 months prior to entering UA. Did you get the plan? Izuku asked Ochako, as she nodded her head. Alright, I will do my best to keep Iida and Bakugo busy. You make some projectiles in order to use against Iida, he won't be able to make sharp turns on this roof. Izuku said, entering the stairwell. Good luck, Ochako called out, as she collected some rocks and pebbles. Alright, time to show Kacchan that I am not a worthless Deku. Izuku thought to himself as a mirage appeared behind himself in the form of a green-haired woman looking at him in sadness. Izuku ran through the floors closest to the roof as he ran into Iida as the boy had run to go past him. But just as he ran right next to Izuku they exchanged a look just before Izuku's arm stuck out faster than the boy could perceive and was clotheslined. As the boy flopped to the ground in pain Izuku jumped onto his prone body as he placed the handcuffs over his arms holding them in place. Iida has been defeated and is taken from the match. All Might called out from the comms. Izuku knew that taking out Iida was the best way for the match to go in the way he wanted, since Kacchan wouldn't try to go for the bomb. All he had to do was keep Bakugo busy in order to keep him from going after his teammate. He arrived around a corner when he saw Bakugo taken by surprise and went to go for an attack on him with an explosive right hook. Izuku changed his anatomy in order to tank the blast as he placed scales all over his body and increased his size in order to intimidate Bakugo. His dorsal plates started to glow and pulsate as he went on the attack in order to keep the bomber busy. He knew that he was strong enough to stop the young man all on his own, it was why he was capable of stopping Iida so fast. Izuku knew Bakugo though, he would use anything necessary in order to win, even Izuku's own knowledge against him. He dodged an explosive left jab that the blonde had thrown at him as he tail-swiped the boy across the massive room they were in. Young Bakugo, you have 5 minutes left to get to the bomb. All Might warned. As the fight continued on screen, the black-haired tall girl spoke out to the teacher. All Might, sir, do you think that this fight is a grudge match between the two? The girl asked, curiously. Whatever do you mean, young Yaoyorozu? All Might asked, confused. Well, it seems like Bakugo-kun has been fighting based on a grudge, and Midoriya-san has been fighting him to a standstill when he was more than capable of taking out Iida, who was in a different weight class entirely with one arm. Do you think Midoriya-san is fighting for a grudge match? Yaoyorozu asked. I wouldn't think so, I heard about his plan. He was going to originally keep both Bakugo shonen and Iida shonen busy for the entire 10 minutes before time was called. But now that you think about it, he wasn't even winded from a blow like that to his left arm. All Might muttered. The class continued to watch as Izuku tossed Bakugo around the room like a ragdoll as he finally showed something of a sign of his lowering stamina. He was breathing lightly as Bakugo was breathing heavily. Then there was a ding heard in the room that caught both boys off guard, and Bakugo was smiling ferally. Pointing his gauntlet at Izuku, he started monologuing about how if Izuku knew about his quirk so much, then he should know about what happens when he has a storage tank for his sweat to accumulate. "Stop this, Bakugo shonen. You could kill him," All Might called out, stunning the whole class. "He won't die if he dodges," Bakugo called out, releasing the blast. They all watched as Izuku's face became filled with an unexplainable look of fear as they saw his eyes start to dull a little bit before growling even more and moving around the blast as best as he could towards the boy. Needless to say, that what happened next was completely bonkers for the class as Izuku moved through the blast as he kept his eyes closed and stuck his arm through the blast range towards Bakugo's face and grabbed it before slamming the boy to the ground. As soon as the camera's view was blocked by the smoke and debris, they saw something that honestly looked beautiful as glowing blue and green lights came from through the smoke and caused it to move away faster to see what happened. As they looked at the screen, they found Izuku standing over Bakugo with an intense look on his face as he stared the boy in his eyes and spoke for the first time to him in the exercise. "Can you not think for once in your pathetic life? If you let a blast that loud as well as massive indoors, you could cause the whole building to collapse. Ochako is on the roof with nothing to protect her from falling 19 stories to the ground. You could have killed her." Izuku roared as he was shown to have multiple burns all over his torn body. His hero suit had been reduced to cinders as his body was revealed to everyone in the room watching the fight. There was burned starburst-shaped scars on his lower torso as well as a massive handprint over his left shoulder. But the most important scar that they could see on his body was the massive words displayed over his back from where Izuku screamed at Bakugo that wasn't covered by his dorsal plates. The words clearly stated, "The quirkless wonder, quirkless Deku, a worthless hero." As soon as the entire room saw those words, the only things that people could ask was, how the hell did he get that scar? Hero team wins. "Hey Kacchan, what kind of hero team should we be?" Izuku asked, as he sat near his friend on the ground near the playground. "We will be Mighty Man and Dynamite, the heroic duo who is smarter, stronger, faster than the #1 hero All Might," Kacchan said, as he smiled at Izuku. "Well, is there a way to start training ourselves without hurting ourselves?" Izuku asked as Kacchan looked at Izuku. "Well, Zu-kun, we should probably work on our stamina as well as endurance. That way we can continue fighting for longer against our opponents and villains," Kacchan said, smirking. "That sounds great," Izuku said, jumping from the ground to start the training. The two would run around the playground as they were training to become heroes as children. The other adults in the area would look at the wonder duo with awe as well as chuckle at their antics. They would also cheer them on whenever they play hero versus villains whenever the teachers joined in playing with the boys and girls. It wasn't until the day that Izuku had gone to go see the doctor that things began to change around him, and he knew it. Mrs. Uratani, can a quirkless person become a hero? Izuku asked as Mrs. Uratani looked at him. "I'm not sure. There hasn't been one since the age of quirks began. I'm sure that whatever you do that you can become a hero," Uratani-sensei said, smiling at Izuku. It was immediately after lunch that the children noticed that Uratani-sensei wasn't present for the rest of the year preceding that question. 1. Izuku woke up with a massive headache. He had been witnessing his oldest memories coming back as he slept during the night. He had no idea what they were trying to tell him, but he knew that they would come to a head soon and that he would have to be ready to fight soon. His alpha senses were moving about the area to search for a possible threat that was near the school only to find reporters moving towards the school. Getting up from his little bed, he noticed that his father and mother were present this time as he snuggled up to them both as he gained a slight purr from both of them before leaving the platform. As he walked around the lost city of Atlantis, he made it to the small puddle of water that seemed more like a puddle than anything linking the hollow earth to the land above. Moving into the water, he swam towards the surface of the above world of the hollow earth as he made his way swimming towards the land where his school was located. It wouldn't be until around 7 a.m. that he would arrive to the school in his uniform as he shook some remaining water from his head as he walked through the reporters as they tried to ask him questions about All Might. As soon as he entered the gate, he noticed that his tail seemed a bit heavier as he noticed some of his classmates hitching a ride on him. Kaminari-san, Ashido-san, Why are you sitting on my tail? He asked, as the girl stood up from his tail. I was hiding from the reporters. I didn't want to be stopped from entering the school because of their soundbites. The girl said, happily bouncing from one foot to the other, allowing him and Kaminari-san to watch as her breasts bounced with each jump. Shaking his head from the hormonal part of his mind, he walked towards the building where he found Ochako standing near the door happily waiting for him. As he continued into the building with her animatedly talking about what happened in the battle trials, he smiled at her open arms as she explained what happened in each battle. Truth be told, he had watched the battle trials, but he had been sleeping near the end of them since they were becoming more and more boring to him. He wanted to fight a strong opponent soon and would wish that he could meet someone who could match his strength class. He was already showing Skyla that he was a force to be reckoned with all on his own with his Titan form, and his human-Titan hybrid form was at least half the strength of his Titan form fully. Sitting down in his seat behind Kachan, Izuku waited for the teacher to enter the class as the rest of the students in the class had soon arrived and the teacher wasn't far behind. Hello class, I want to inform you that your training exercises were a good match. Bakugo, don't let your opponent string you on like that, that is how you can lose your life. Midoriya, when you are given an opportunity to defeat your opponent, don't let them continue breathing if it means that you can have a good fight, that is how civilians die. Todoroki, you need to make sure that you tone it down on your quirk usage since you need to use your fire more. Don't even start with me, young man, I will not have any of my students half-assing this class or else you will be placed in general education. Aizawa-sensei said, as all the students nodded their heads as the teacher moved on to other subjects. Now for the most important part of your time here at UA. Aizawa-sensei said, as he paused for dramatics. You will have to choose a class president, Aizawa said, as he started to pull out a sleeping bag. What should we do to choose a class president? Iida asked, chopping his hand and arm in the air. I could care less about how it's done, just make sure you have 2 people acting as class and vice president of the entire 1A class. The man said, before placing himself on the ground to get some much-needed sleep. With Iida talking about doing the vote diplomatically, Izuku focused on the quirks of his classmates as he wrote everything he could about them without doing much of anything. Once he was given a few small pieces of paper, he wrote down a couple of names, one for each gender to who he thought would make a good leader for the class. Within a few minutes the tallied points were placed on the whiteboard as Iida tallied the numbers before people had drug Izuku and Yaoyorozu Momo up to the front. Izuku had still been writing in his notebook about what the class's quirks were as he finally noticed how the class was looking at him. When did I get up here? Am I note-taking and walking at the same time now? Izuku mumbled to himself, as the class looked at one another. Well, I think that personally, this is good. We have a cinnamon roll as a class president and Yaomomo as the vice would be able to curb his mumbling habit. One of the students said, as Izuku shook his head. I thank you all for choosing me as the class president, and I can certainly hope that I can live up to your expectations. Izuku said as Momo said, the same thing. As the class went through the main part of the day learning English, modern art history, modern science, and math, they had been too busy to notice some movement outside the gates as one of the people stared at Izuku intently. Only a matter of time, the hooded man said, walking away. Izuku was sitting at his seat as he had a small flask of radiation that he placed near his mouth to drink up for himself in order to keep himself going. He had been listening to his classmates talk about the history of each other's families that he had spent his time looking out the window with a smile on his face as he saw the clear skies. I wonder how the meetings with the other class presidents and their vice presidents are going to be like. Momo asked, as Izuku looked over at her. It will mainly talk about what we will be doing during the build-up to the sports festival as well as the grading of class papers. We are basically taking desk jobs for free and helping the teachers lower the workload on themselves. Izuku said, as he yawned. Not get much sleep last night? Ochako asked, looking at him. No, just some weird memories are coming back to me. Been happening since the first day of school actually, probably nothing. Izuku said, as he grumbled about getting more sleep. Brr, intruder alert. Please form an orderly line and go outside to line up with your class. Intruder alert. Izuku noticed that the alarm was going off in the room as Iida grabbed the arm of an upperclassman as he asked what was happening. Their answer was that the school's been infiltrated and that the place hadn't been infiltrated in the entire time they had been there. Taking his classmates' safety into his hands, Izuku called his classmates over to him as he allowed them to climb onto his tail as he made sure that they were safe from any and all harm. Through the pushing and shoving, Iida had noticed that it was just the press as Izuku nodded at the boy as he called out the students of the school about how it was only the press and that they should conduct themselves in an orderly manner. After clearing out the hallways, the students of Class 1A had arrived at their homeroom in order to know what they were doing for Hero Informatics. It was here that their teacher had entered the classroom as he informed them about a trip that would be happening in a couple of days to do their rescue training. But for the day they would be training in quirkless combat. As the class got their gym uniforms on and headed outside to train with one another, Izuku had teamed up with Ochako and Tsuyu as the two girls needed the training of fighting really badly. The training was brutal for the girls as Izuku held back a lot of his strength so that he wouldn't kill them, just bruise them slightly. The girls were thankful for the training as Izuku had been teaching them at the same time about how to launch a punch at someone as well as the weak spots to hit a villain at in order to incapacitate them fast. It was here that Izuku's phone went off as he looked at the hero news and saw that his parents were battling Ghidorah again as the monster was trying to defeat them both once more. I guess my home is going to be lonely again. Izuku mumbled to himself, unknowing of the girls hearing that. Where do you live, Midori? Ashido asked, curiously. I live at the bottom of the ocean. In the lost city of Atlantis. Izuku said, looking at them for a moment. Your home is the lost city of Atlantis? ? Quote. The whole class yelled. I mean yeah. Monarch has one of their massive stations just outside the hole heading towards it. Izuku said, as the class asked to be brought there. As much as I would love to bring you all there. I can't. Izuku said, as Momo and Ochako looked at him confused. Why not? Momo asked, as Izuku gave her a deadpanning look. It's filled to the brim of radiation. You all would die from the power the place radiates alone. The human body cannot handle the place. Izuku said, as they looked at him. I was absorbing the power of both Godzilla's and Ghidorah's power attacks. I was able to continue to absorb the power, making me incapable of dying. That's different, Izuku said, as the class collectively said drats. It had been a couple of days since the announcement of the rescue training as the class had gotten onto the bus in order to head there. It was a field trip for the class to learn how to be a real hero on the field just from the building they were going to learn it from. The teacher stationed there will be a high-ranking rescue heroine who had been in that portion of the business for years. They all arrived within about 2 hours at the building as it was shaped like a massive dome of glass. Well class, this is the place, get out and wait for the teacher to appear. Aizawa-sensei said, as the class moved towards the building. It was here that the heroine that Aizawa-sensei told them about walked into view as they were smiling with their eyes. Hello students, I am sure you all know who I am, but I am the space heroine, 13. The heroine said, as the class started to mumble about her quirk as well as hero status, with Ochako being very vocal about it. There might be a few things you all need to learn about your quirks. It is that not all quirks are just for show. Some of them are extremely dangerous since you learned that from the battle trials. But if you all know about my quirk, it is a black hole that I can summon and displace at will. But with how powerful as well as the amount of people I had saved with it, it is just as easily capable of killing those very same people if I am not careful. I want you all to learn from this experience of rescue training and know that not everyone will be capable of being saved. You will lose the lives of the civilians you are saving. That is all I have to say about that part of the information. 13 said, as Aizawa-sensei walked over. Where is All Might? The man asked, as the heroine pulled up 3 fingers that immediately got Izuku to think about the day All Might crushed his dreams. Can a quirkless person like me be capable of saving people with a smile like you? A 10-month younger Izuku asked All Might. You asked me if a quirkless person, someone who is without power, can become a hero. As much as I would love to tell you that you should try, I can't in good conscience tell you to become a hero. You could become a doctor or police officer. They get crap for not saving the people that heroes do and get a lot of flack for it, but it's a really good job to get. But you need to remember to be realistic. I'm sorry that I am the one to tell you this, young man. My words have consequences, and if I sent you out there as a new hero you would only die. The man said, before walking down the stairs. As soon as the memory was gone, Izuku shook his head more as he walked with his class that had started to walk away. They entered the building as they stood in awe of the areas that were created for their training, and they were all pumped for the rescue training to begin. It was here that the lights of the building started to flicker and Izuku's dorsal plates began to spasm out of control as he growled. Midoriya, what are you doing? Aizawa asked, a little concerned. We're about to be attacked. My instincts are telling me to fight whatever is here. Izuku said, looking at his teacher. You will all leave immediately, and whoever. Aizawa couldn't finish his sentence as a massive portal appeared in the plaza. It was large and purple in appearance as a hand was coming through and pulled it apart, revealing a villain who had hands all over his body as more and more villains started to swarm the plaza. As soon as all the villains had appeared in the area, they all stared at the seemingly terrified students as the hand's villain noticed Izuku's glowing dorsal plates. We will be taking that titan from you, heroes like you don't deserve a pet like them. The hand's villain said, as his second-in-command disappeared as Aizawa went to fight the villains. As the students and Izuku were retreating towards the entrance of the dome, the second-in-command villain appeared in front of them. I apologize for the interruption of a sure-to-be rescue training session. But we are the League of Villains, and we are here to kill All Might. The misty villain said. I apologize for the interruption of a sure-to-be rescue training class. But we villains are here for the fall of the number one hero. All Might, the villain said, as he loomed over the class. As Izuku stared at the villain, he noticed how the said villain had a small weak spot that he was able to find, and just as he was about to move forward, Katsuki had started to fight with the villain. Using the blonde bomber's attack as a distraction, Izuku ran over to the door whilst holding Iida with his tail and pulled him towards the door, and with a feat of strength that the engine boy couldn't understand, yanked the doors enough on his own and tossed him out. If you want to use your speed for something, Iida-san, you must use it to get our teachers. Izuku said, closing the door. As Iida was sitting there thinking about why Izuku had done that, they ultimately decided to just head out and find their teachers and get help. With the rest of the heroes present, they'd be capable of stopping the villains for sure, so while Iida was running away, Izuku noticed how the villain was about to release his attack on 13 from behind and charged an atomic blast for the villain. As soon as 13 felt her back begin to open up from her own quirk, a blast had passed by her black hole and sent the villain down towards the door. Looking over where Izuku was, she found his dorsal plates thrumming with power as he stomped over to the villain and stepped on his chest. As the villain was struggling to get the boy off of him, 13 used this time in order to get the rest of the students towards the door to evacuate. Midoriya, the rest of the students are out of there. We need to leave now. 13 called out, as Izuku looked over at her. I'm sorry, the boy said, before using his surprising amount of speed to slam the doors shut. Locked inside the building with the mist villain getting back up, Izuku stared the villain down as his emerald eyes began to thrum with an energy unknown to him. You were willing to sacrifice yourself and your safety for your classmates? The villain asked, stunned. I am the next in line for the king of the monsters. I will not be defeated by low-class trash. Izuku said, as he attacked the villain quickly. While Izuku was fighting the mist villain, Aizawa was defeating villain after villain that was in the plaza, and he was keeping an eye on the blue-haired individual who had hands all over his body. Eraserhead is so cool, I can't believe that you are taking down my mobs. You really are a small mini-boss. Whatever, Nomu beat him. The hand villain said, as the last thing Aizawa had heard was the stomping of the ground behind him and a fist being smashed into the back of his head, bringing his world into darkness. Izuku had sent the villain flying towards the plaza in time to see a monster smash his teacher into the ground. Aizawa-sensei, the boy called out, following the villain to his teacher. As soon as he made it to the bottom of the stairs, he punched the creature holding his teacher in place and it was sent flying in the distance. How did you manage to hit it? Aizawa asked, as Izuku told him about his upgraded DNA. Well, at least you can handle yourself. What happened to the rest of the class? The man asked as he sighed, trying to get some breath back. Class is outside the USJ. Iida had run off to get the teachers on my order. I stayed back here to make sure that we didn't lose our teacher in our first year. Izuku said, standing in front of him. What do you think you can do against these people? You are only a student. Aizawa scolded Izuku. Looking back at his teacher, Izuku showed the man his evolving eyes as he turned back towards the screaming villain man-child as he was running towards them with fury. Using his tail to swipe the villain away from him, the mist villain had used a portal to take the man-child and have him reappear above him as the villain slammed his hand on Izuku's back. The slap caused Izuku to look back at him with an unamused expression as the young man stared in shock as his quirk wasn't working on his body. How? My quirk won't work on you. The man-child complained. I guess you need to know something, man-child. I am the son of the king of the monsters, and a puny quirk like yours won't even do a bit of damage to me. The only ones who can even come close to damaging me is either your Nomu or another titan. Izuku said, as he grabbed the young man and threw him at the other villain too fast to be caught. As they both tumbled to the ground, Izuku smirked at both of them as he focused his eyes on the Nomu as it moved in the way to prevent any more damage to the two leading villains. Aizawa-sensei, I will take care of the Nomu. You take care of disintegration and portals. Izuku said, as the man nodded his head as Izuku went on the attack. With all three villains split apart, Izuku spent his entire fight in keeping the Nomu away from his master as he beat it into submission. Punch after punch, kick after kick, tail swipe combining into another kick sent it into the water zone as Izuku slowly crawled into the water. Aizawa watched as his student willingly entered the water as if it was second nature as the hand villain began to laugh. Ha 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 ha, he won't survive against my Nomu as well as other villains there. The hand villain called out. And as soon as he said that, the other villains who were inside the water came running out screaming about a monster inside the water zone. As the villains ran over to the hand villain, they pleaded to be taken away from the area since there was a monster amongst them all. As the hand villain was about to scratch his neck in frustration as well as fury, a black blur had come flying out of the water towards the sky through the dome of the USJ. And what they all saw come out of the water afterwards was downright terrifying as a giant Gojira monster had appeared from the water zone of the USJ roaring into the sky as if it won a fight. Is that Midoriya? Aizawa asked as the other villains stared in both awe as well as complete fear. He beat my Nomu. That Nomu was supposed to kill All Might. ? That is legitimately cheating. The man-child screamed in frustration. Looking at the young man, Aizawa spoke up to him as he was wanting this fight to be over with so that they could look over the footage. But just as he was about to open his mouth, the glass from the dome had broken down again as a new monster had appeared in the area. It had massive wings as well as multiple legs that were as sharp as daggers at the end, and it had orange eyes with a look of contempt for the new Gojira. As the Gojira finally noticed the presence of the newcomer, he narrowed his emerald and moth-like eyes as he growled at the creature. The new monster clicked as it screeched at Izuku before going on the attack. Unknown to everyone else, Tokyo was being attacked by a similar monster but bigger than what was attacking Izuku. Outside the USJ, 13 had been calling all the heroes and told them about how the USJ was being attacked and that Izuku and Aizawa were locked inside the building. After hearing that the teachers were going to be on their way over to the building as fast as possible, she heard one of her students make a screaming sound. Looking over, she saw how he was showing his classmates about an attack coming from Tokyo, who at this point was a massive monster who had no wings and had massive legs. It had grayish-orange colored eyes as it smashed buildings in its wake in order to search for something. All right class, get on the bus and get ready to head out. We need to escape from the USJ before that mist villain teleports us back there. 13 said, as the students got on board the bus. It was here that some of the girls had called her over. What is it, Uraraka-chan? 13 asked, as Ochako stared at the woman. Is Izu-kun going to be okay? She asked in complete fear. Don't worry, there is a reason why he has those dorsal plates on his back, they are more than an intimidation display. 13 said, cryptically as she remembered the conversation between her and Nezu. So what do you need me to teach the child of Godzilla? 13 asked, 5 hours before the trip happened. Whatever happens at the USJ today, you are to allow young Midoriya to fight whatever and whoever arrives. You cannot stop him from entering his alpha predator instincts to fight a new threat to his reign over the earth. Nezu said, as 13 looked at him incredulously. What about the possible damage he could cause to the building? ? 13 13 asked in complete worry. You don't need to worry about him. If he damages the building, it isn't anything that Smentos can't handle. He will be able to bring the damage to property to a minimum if there is a chance of not doing too much. But if there isn't a choice in stopping the damage, he has full authority to fight whatever comes to fight him. Nezu said, not leaving any more arguments for discussion. I'm sorry for the outburst. 13 said, as she left the office. Shaking her head, she enters the bus when she noticed a blur coming to the building from above and slammed into the roof of the building. What the fuck was that? The entire class screamed out, as glass had been blasted to the sky. Inside the dome, Izuku was seen fighting with the new monster as he tossed it around the different zones of the USJ. It really wasn't that powerful against him. Even if it landed some hits against his body, it seemed as if it really didn't have any experience in fighting him. And since Izuku has the mind of a human whose brain capacity is going millions of miles a second, the monster had no chance in hell against him. He was basically toying with the creature as if it was a new toy. But as soon as the creature had noticed its failed attack to kill him, it tried to flee from the area as Izuku gave chase. If this creature was going to where he thought it was, he needed to stop it. He stepped out of the flood zone of the USJ as he followed the creature and made sure to grab his teacher in the process as he broke through the building and placed him on the roof of the bus. With him breaking the glass on the bus window, he told 13 to drive the bus to the safety of the school campus as he had Yaoyorozu place a camera on Izuku's back. As he was chasing the monster that was taking flight into the sky, Izuku felt something stick to his upper back, and as he turned to see who did it, he saw Yaoyorozu smiling at him before nodding. Returning the nod to her, he moved to give chase and headed towards the ocean where he could move faster to catch up. As it turned out, the new monster had arrived near the ocean as well, as if in search of something important. And as it caught its breath, Izuku stayed beneath the surface as he waited for it to lean its head down closer to the water for the perfect time to strike. As soon as it went to drink from the salty seawater, Izuku struck as soon as its face guzzled some water down its throat and grabbed it by the wing and pulled it into the water. Knowing his advantage in the water against the creature, he started to twist the wing of the creature as he increased the pressure on it as he felt it rip and tear from it. As soon as he pushed the wing out of the way, he swam to catch up to his prey when another creature appeared and tackled him into the water. As it slammed its claw into his lower abdomen, he released his atomic breath and sent it blasted back when he noticed something off about his atomic ray. My power is being suppressed, he thought to himself. Shaking his head, he decided to go full power in fighting these monsters, and he could sense his father's presence watching the fight from afar, gauging his power compared to the other monsters of this world. Getting into his own fighting stance, he growled at the creatures as multiple helicopters had arrived on the scene in order to record the event. As the two had rushed Izuku, he went for the injured one after tail swiping the other into the water as he grabbed the claws of the smaller monster and pulling it to him as he grabbed the head of it and slammed it into the water as he stepped on its neck. Holding it under the water, he watched as the other one, noticing how his instincts told him that it was a female, but he had no clue as to what creature it was within his father's reign. Just as he was about to attack the female monster, a new one appeared similar in looks to Mothra, but it was different in terms of looks. It had purple markings on its wings as it started to screech at the female monster that had been fighting Izuku. Looking down, he noticed that the bubbles from the monster he was standing on had ceased as he decided that it was surely dead. As he took a few steps from it, he decided to follow that pre-Quirk movie about double tapping, and as he charged an atomic blast at the smaller monster, he picked it up from the water and opened its mouth as he fired it down its throat. As its body awoke from being essentially drowned, it started to flail from being blasted down its guzzle, and it soon started to burn from the edges of its neck to its torso. And soon enough the head was decapitated from the body as said body fell into the water. Giving a winning roar into the sky, both female monsters ahead of himself looked over as he dropped the head of the creature into the ocean water as he lowered his gaze on the female monster in front of him. Clearly the Mothra look-alike was on his side since it had some damage dealt to the creature in front of him, but the Mothra monster was damaged even more than the female monster. Looking at her nose, she had his markings on her wings as she looked away as if embarrassed. It wasn't long until Izuku ran after the other creature as he slammed into it, causing it to be surprised, but it wouldn't go down without a fight as it bit into his gills on his neck. As Izuku felt pain in his Titan form for the first time, he was pulled down into the water by the female monster as he had no clue how to stop it from releasing its grip on him. But as soon as he faked being dead, she started to release her grip. When it was all over, he swiftly, faster than she could predict, jumped onto her body and started to rip her to shreds. His alpha instincts telling him to end it now before she could take on his champion. Whatever the hell that means. As soon as the creature had no legs to walk on, Izuku stepped onto her chest as he glared down at her as he roared into her face. She was going to die, and he would make it a swift one if she allowed him to do it. He wasn't okay with killing anything, but since she was a threat to his very existence, he wouldn't allow for her to live. As she growled in solemnness, Izuku reached down and he bit down on her neck as her orange, gray eyes stared into his emerald moth. He blinked twice as she blinked once as he snapped her neck with a massively loud crack. As soon as her limp body fell into the water, Izuku roared into the sky once more as the people who watched the news live had been in shock. It was here that they watched as Izuku's titan form moved closer to the Mothra monster and they thought that he would kill the new arrival. But were pleasantly surprised when they heard a mass of clicking and groans from the two of them as Izuku for some reason lifted the Mothra creature and moved towards the ocean. As soon as they were out of view from the news, the helicopters had left the area to report on the devastation that one of the monsters had done to Tokyo. Izuku swam into the ocean holding the Mothra creature to his chest as it held its breath as he went deep into the ocean. Once he was nearing the cave where he called home, he overheard from the sonar systems that came from Monarch that they were panicking over this new creature being shown to the world. He laid the creature down near his spot to collect some radiation so that they could regenerate their broken and torn wings from their battle. Whilst that was happening, Izuku slowly but surely laid down near the creature as he felt a kinship with them. Nothing too bad, just a slow relationship to be formed. It was here that the creature established a connection to his mind as she started to speak to him. It's been too long since I have long since seen another Gojira. Which do you spawn from? She asked, in a seemingly regal voice. I hail from Godzilla and Mothra. They used a rite of rebirth in order to allow me to use Gaia's gift more effectively. Izuku said, as the moth creature nodded their head. My name is Momo Yaoyorozu. I am sure you remember me from class. The moth creature, now aptly named Momo, asked. You are the woman who had the more regal flair to them, yes? Izuku asked, as the moth creature nodded. Well, nice to officially meet you, Momo, and welcome to the Titan's world. Izuku said, as he smiled in his Titan form. Don't you get some kind of identity crisis over the Titan form? Momo asked, as her form purred from his attention. Yes, but it hasn't messed with me for a while. Although you might need to inform Aizawa-sensei about your status as a Mothra specimen. Izuku said, as the girl shook her head. I am a distant cousin of Mothra's race. I am part of the Batra race of Missouri. Momo said, as Izuku nodded. Well, let's get some sleep before we can go back to school in a few days. Izuku said, as Momo relaxed in his cave. Monarch was in shambles. The world was under attack by multiple Mutos, and they had just seen that Godzilla had taken them down on their own. But this one seemed different in size as it was slightly smaller than Godzilla, but at the same time it had moth-like eyes compared to the pure blue ones. Dr. Serizawa had made his way into the bridge when his men started freaking out when they saw Izuku's Godzilla form moving towards his little haven away from the world with Batra. Sir, Batra is seen being pulled all the way to the lost city of Atlantis. One of the soldiers called out. Is Godzilla killing it? Serizawa asked, as the others shook their head. He seems to be treating it with care. The soldier said, as Serizawa told them to keep an eye on the situation. Grom had entered the room with some sound graphs as she showed them to Serizawa. Serizawa, this isn't just any kind of Batra, this is a descendant of a hybrid Batra. She is quite literally the last of her kind. Grom said, as Serizawa nodded his head. What else is there to know about this Batra? He asked as fast as possible. She seems to be connecting to him on a molecular level. She is trying to become his champion. Grom said, as Serizawa stared at her. So, she is trying to become like how Godzilla and Mothra are in a symbiotic relationship. Not to mention an actual relationship. Serizawa said, as he thought about the amount of fanfiction this might bring. What did the Godzilla carrying the Batra's eyes look like? Green with moths or plain blue? Serizawa asked, as one of the animal experts came forward. It was Green Eyes with moths, sir. My god, that was Izuku. He defeated his first group of Mutos all on his own. His parents will be extremely happy, Serizawa said, as the others looked at him. What do you mean Godzilla and Mothra will be happy? Grom asked. The first kill a Gojira makes is against their natural predators. The Mutos actively hunt the Gojiras in order to make their children spawn inside them and consume their radiation until they can no longer sustain themselves. Izuku just took 2 of them on, a male and female, and if Batra hadn't made it into the battle, Izuku would have fared exactly the same as his father, if not even better. Batra just provided the perfect chance to take out the male Muto before he became too much of an annoyance in his fight with the female Muto. Serizawa explained as the others understood. A call was coming from the bridge as one of the soldiers answered the call. Looking around, they found Serizawa and called him over. As the man moved towards the phone, an angry principal was heard on the other side demanding to know where 2 of his students just disappeared to. I apologize for the long wait, Principal Nezu, but your students are fine. I believe that they are both in the lost city of Atlantis, Serizawa said, as there was confused speaking on the other side of the phone. I know, Yaoyorozu Momo is a part of the Batra hybrid species that was created millions of years ago. She is currently with Izuku in the bottom of the ocean. You want to see her? Sure, I can get a helicopter there and you a suit that protects you from the Earth's radiation. See you then, Serizawa said, as he hung up the phone. As the hours flew by, Serizawa had busied himself on some projects that he wanted to have done for the future of the Gojira species as a whole. He had been keeping an eye on the entrances into the atmosphere for a while now, and there wasn't any kind of creatures coming in from the deepest parts of space. With Izuku being a very young Gojira, he wasn't prepared to take on threats that happened in the past like Space Godzilla as well as Ghidorah, and he certainly didn't want Biollante to return back from where she left the planet from. They were doing their research when the principal of UA had entered the room with a furious expression on his face as he moved towards Serizawa. You have 15 minutes to tell me why 2 Mutos had attacked my school without informing me and my teachers about it, the creature said angrily. As much as principal had fun with torturing the students of his school with quizzes that were easy for him but almost impossible for the students, he did care for their safety. The simple fact that they appeared without our knowledge was more concerning than informing Yunezu. I had no idea that there were 2 more Mutos moving about the surface until the news came out earlier today. In fact, I was trying to find out how they were able to cause so much damage without our knowledge. I apologize for not informing you sooner, Principal, Serizawa said, bowing at the waist. You better be sorry. I can't allow my students to be killed by monsters and be blamed by their parents for not having the correct amount of security to prevent such attacks, Nezu said, as Serizawa looked at him. There is no way security could protect your students from a Titan attack. The only way to prevent one from happening is to stop it from happening before it can become a threat, Serizawa said, as Nezu nodded his head. What are the chances of another Titan appearing out of nowhere to challenge Izuku? Nezu asked, as he looked at the images the rovers were giving them of the lost city of Atlantis. It is really high now since there are monsters attacking the cities in search of the new king. I can only hope that the Japanese government can handle all the attacks happening. We have a new Kong on his island of Skull Island, but he isn't old enough to pose a challenge to Izuku just yet. Not to mention his alpha predator status hasn't reached the wavelengths of Izuku just yet, so there is no need to worry about him, Serizawa said, as Nezu nodded and placed his suit on. I will be in the city to gather enough information from Izuku about how to detect this kind of information. See you when I return, Nezu said, leaving the scientist to his devices. Nezu was inside the moon vehicle as it traversed the waters towards the underwater home of seemingly 2 of his students. As soon as it appeared near the edge of the Mariana Trench, it opened up a hole as he drove the vehicle into it, as the entire area was shown to be covered in gravity as it was pushed towards the city. Upon going through the small wormhole, Nezu's craft appeared on the other side of it as he saw the ruins of such a beautiful city all around himself. Looking towards where the radiation would most likely be located, he made his way over there in order to see where his students were and if they were all right. Landing the vehicle on land, he walked through the ruins as he stared at his oxygen meter as it showed that he had 100% oxygen at the moment as he nodded to himself. He soon walked up to the giant form of Izuku as he was seemingly sleeping right next to the Batra creature as he tapped its nose. As its nose made a twitching motion, it opened its orange-green eyes as it stared at him in shock and horror. "Hello Yaoyorozu-san, I am here to make sure that you are safe and sound and not dying. Are you all right from your attack against the Mutos?" Nezu asked, as Momo's Titan form stared at him for a second before nodding. "You aren't in need of healing from recovery, girl?" he asked, further as the female creature shook its head. "I see. How about Izuku? Is he in need of healing?" he asked, as he looked over to the sleeping Gojira. "No, he is fine. He is just resting his body from the amount of work he went through fighting two Mutos. He had used too much energy in fighting the Mutos during the fight in the USJ. Momo telepathically said, as Nezu nodded. "Well, I was only here to make sure that I know about your condition. I hope that you can return by the time classes return in session on Monday," Nezu said, as Momo nodded her head. With that, the creature left the room as he focused on his job of making sure that he scares the subordinates of his colleagues. Off in the distance of Monster Island, a group of monsters noticed the energy of the growing power of Godzilla's child. "We have a new king to challenge. Let's make his entrance into the power of King of the Monsters as hard as possible," one of the lion creatures said, as they all laughed. Izuku was sleeping on the ground within Atlantis as he was cuddled up against another monster as she was purring softly against his heat. After realizing that there was someone else inside his home with him, Izuku woke up immediately and looked over at the creature sleeping against him. It was the Batra creature that assisted him in his fight against the two creatures that he had no clue existed. If he remembered correctly, the two creatures he fought were Mutos, since he remembered Godzilla fighting against them about 100 or 2 years ago. Shaking his head as he got his bearings, he saw that there was only a couple of minutes before they had to leave for the school. Shaking the sleeping Batra from her slumber, he saw as her eyes opened up to reveal black orbs that had his Titan form within them. She then started to glow a black color as she was revealed to be Momo Yaoyorozu as she looked at him softly as he blushed slightly at her. Looking away, he gave her enough time to place some clothes over her body as she clothed herself. As they were moving about the area, Momo spoke to him as he transformed back into his human form. "So, we should talk about why I am a part of the Titan race," she asked, as Izuku stared at her for a second. "No, I already sensed the power of Gaia within you. I should have known that you were a child of Gaia from the beginning but chose not to. Anyway, we should be prepared to head over to the school in order to not be late," Izuku said, as Momo nodded her head. After waiting for a few minutes to change, the duo headed up to the Monarch facility as they would wait for a helicopter in order to get them to the school without having to waste energy to traverse the world to get there. As they were swimming up to the surface of the home of the humans living above the hollow earth, Izuku and Momo noticed a massive shift in the alpha predators. Izuku looked over towards the massive figure covered by the clouds as they were making their move closer and closer to the young Titan. He sensed that this one was an alpha predator that had wanted to test Izuku's might against his own. Izuku, sensing the challenge, allowed Momo to leave as he went away from her position on his own in order to face off against this threat to test his own mettle. Transforming into his Titan form, Izuku stood in the ocean waters as he waited for his new opponent to come over to greet him. As the creature nosedived towards him, Izuku got a good look at this new monster as it was an amalgamation of a lion, bird, as well as a lizard all in one monster as it dived further towards him. As it smashed right into his body, he was able to catch it before it forced him down into the water as it struggled to get out itself because of its feathers. Taking advantage of this, Izuku wrapped his tail around the creature as he drags it down further into the depths of the ocean, wanting to end this fight as soon as possible. As he brought it into his underwater cove where he sleeps in order to regenerate any damage dealt to him, the griffin took to the skies again as it explored the area. "Once I have defeated and killed you, Alpha, I will make sure to take over this area and make it mine," the griffin called out, screeching as it flew towards him. Izuku watched the movements closely as the creature flew towards him at a rapid pace. It was many times faster than the male Muto that he fought on the beach of Dagoba. As he walked towards the creature, he made damn sure that his movements were precise as well predicted enough to make a hit guaranteed. As soon as the griffin was about to strike with his talons, Izuku went for the attack by grabbing said talons, causing the creature to squawk in confusion as well as surprise, as Izuku pulled him in before biting down into its thick hide and holding it there as he charged an atomic breath. The griffin, knowing that if this hit, he will die from the close proximity of the attack, prepared his own breath attack, that was which he blew air into Izuku's face as he nearly closed his eyes to keep a grip. As soon as his breath was fully charged, he felt something tearing through his skin on the hide of his face as he glared hatefully at the griffin before releasing his breath against its hide. As it screeched in pain, Izuku pushed it back towards the ground as it flailed in pain as it tried to take to the skies once more. Before it could, however, Izuku managed to grab it with his tail and drag it to the ground where it was bowing before him as he laid it on its back and placed his foot on top of its chest. "Do you yield?" Izuku questioned through telepathy. "Never. I am the true alpha predator. I will become the king of the monsters," he cried out as he screeched. "Then death is what you need." Izuku thought towards the monster as he charged his breath attack and grabbed the beak of his opponent. As the beak of his opponent tried his best in order to prevent the inevitable, Izuku pulled the beak apart, and once his charge was complete, he released his breath down the creature's mouth as it tore it apart from the inside out. As soon as the head was pulled from his body, Izuku tossed it across the ground, believing the battle to be won. As he roared out to the heavens, he thought about how this battle was seemingly too easy and stopped his roar as he watched the body closely. And sure enough, the creature began to heal itself all the way back to its original body. As it shook its body around, it looked at Izuku with a new light in its eyes. "You really wanted to kill me there. I thought we were buddies," he called out angrily. "You didn't give me a choice, I gave you an out, and you didn't take it. So I did what my father told me to do against foes who wouldn't submit, kill them to prevent a new threat later on," Izuku said, as the griffin just shuddered from hearing that phrase. "Well, far be it from me to not submit ever again. I think I might get a hernia from that attack," the monster gruffly said, rubbing its ass. "Well, can I head to school now? I need to get to class without making my teacher question why I wasn't at school today," Izuku said, as the griffin just lackadaisy just swam away from the area. As Izuku watched him disappear, his father appeared behind him with a look of happiness on his face with Mothra next to him. "Well, make sure that you make it to school. We will be sure to keep those on Monster Island from attacking you during school hours, and those that do get past us, we apologize for not stopping them fast enough," Godzilla said, as Izuku nodded as he left the area in order to swim back to school in time for class. As Izuku walked through the doors of his classroom, he found that his class were talking to one another as they tried to find out who was causing all the ruckus in the world. He sat down in his seat as Bakugo kept making death threats to him as if it was an everyday Tuesday, and as he sat down, the teacher entered the classroom. "All right, class, ever since the USJ happened, we have needed to increase security around the school, so within the next few months we will be implementing a school-wide dorm system soon, but that will be around your final exams. Anyway, your fight isn't over yet," Aizawa said, as everyone got tensed as he spoke again. "You will be participating in the sports festival as it will be coming up in 2 weeks," the man said, as the whole class erupted into excited shouts as well as rambling about the event. "Now, with that stated, you will all be aware that Midoriya will not be allowed to attend such an event since he will be needed as security for the school," the man said, as he sighed angrily. "What do you mean Deku will be security? He was the main issue for why we were attacked," Bakugo screamed out as Aizawa stared at him. "Midoriya's reason for not participating in the sports festival is for valid reason. He is simply too powerful to even participate. You all wouldn't have your chance to get an internship since he is a too high-value target for everyone. So he will be used as a temporary security option since he will be covering all the patrol areas since he can transform to escape any situation where he will be outnumbered with his sheer size," Aizawa said, before going on a tangent about how nobody could expect to win against him. As the class ended so that Present Mike could start his own class, everyone was preparing themselves for their sports festival. "I will not be doing the sports festival in this FIC since Izuku will just be patrolling around the area and I don't want to write 3 chapters where he is just walking around the area of the stadium." As the day continued on for the students of Class 1A, they were about to leave their class at the end of the day so that they could get some lunch when they noticed the amount of people sitting outside of their class. As they were leaving their classroom, the rest of the other classes looked at them to get a good look at those who survived a villain attack on their rescue lessons. What is with everyone looking at us? Kirishima asked, as Bakugo spoke up. Don't you see? They're looking at us to see how badass we are compared to the information they got from the news. Out of the way, you stupid extras. Watch the real heroes move about the place. Bakugo said, arrogantly. If this is what the hero course is spouting, I don't think I would like to be a hero anymore. A purple-haired boy said, as he looked at the situation in disgust. As the rest of the class were trying to increase their name and not be told that they were rude to others, Izuku moved forward to the boy as he stared at him. What is your quirk if you wanted to be a hero? Izuku asked, as the boy looked at him boredly. Brainwashing. I can control someone who I talk to just by speaking in a certain way. The boy said, as Izuku looked at his body build. You won't be capable of becoming a hero if you never train your actual body. If you want to be a hero so much, how about you train your body before you actually try and become one? Izuku said, as he walked down the hallway. Since you won't be participating, this is a declaration of war against your class. The boy said, walking away. Izuku looked at the young man before smirking at him as he gained a manic smile. Well, I look forward to seeing what you can do against my class with little to no training on how to fight. Izuku said, as he walked away. The rest of the other classes were watching in awe as Izuku had spoken to another student without even starting a riot before another student from the sister class came up about another war declaration to Class 1A. As soon as the day was finished, Izuku had moved his location of where he will be sleeping to the UA campus as he wanted to be as near the school as possible. As Izuku was laying down in the yard of the school, he never noticed how a creature was floating high above the school as it flapped its wings in order to stay out of Izuku's range. Well, this is the current king of monsters' son. I can't wait to start a fight with him. The monster said, as it was revealed to be of a similar race to Rodan. Izuku was getting really tired of all these kaiju attacks on him and the rest of his classmates. He just wanted a few days without any kind of attacks from these guys. They were really starting to get annoying with how frequent they had been getting. He was attacked by Skyla just 2 weeks ago, and the woman then demanded that he mate with her right then as he was forced to flee the area as a lust-filled luxurious woman chased him down the street. He didn't know why the kaiju women had bodies that were seemingly made by the gods, and he didn't know whether that was a compliment to Momo herself or to the kaiju or a mocking. As he was moving about the shopping district on another week, he found himself going against Anguirus as the bastard had stolen ice cream from a little girl who was happy about her apple-flavored ice cream. He killed Anguirus for that. You don't steal a treat from a little girl, much less a 5-year-old little girl. He was still the protector of humanity, damn it. He shook his head at the memories of the fight with that bastard as he kept hiding in his shell, forcing him to toss the monster into the sky and blowing him up towards the upper atmosphere and blowing him up to smithereens. Never before had he been happier to kill something than that moment. He may be against killing things as well as people, but when it came to villainous monsters who take from the children of humanity, he takes it personally. Right now, though, he was trying to establish a connection to Momo Yaoyorozu as she was doing the same in their monster forms since they were going to become mates in the future. He knew that their symbiotic relationship would make their connection completely worthy of becoming the new king and queen of the monsters respectively, but that would mean that they would have to fight their own battles, and Izuku was perfectly fine with that. He just had to make sure that he didn't have any more battles with kaiju at the end of the semester. But then he was called into the principal's office since there was a final exams test coming up for the practical and they needed someone who was powerful enough to pose a threat to Izuku. The principal himself stated that the person he was fighting was a kaiju. Who would have guessed? Arriving at the principal's office was a trying effort since his dorsal plates were very pointed and Izuku wanted to change them so that they wouldn't be a problem in the future. Ah, Midoriya, come in. I have to talk to you about what you need to be doing for your final exams practical. Nezu said, as Izuku entered the room. He noticed that there was a man in a crimson-red tuxedo as he stared at Izuku with scrutinizing eyes, and Izuku was feeling like he was being sized up. You have his eyes, as well as Mothra's symbol in your very own as well, but from what it seems like your body has evolved itself in order to take both features. You will be going up against me, grandnephew, and before you ask, I am Rodan, the one who was against Godzilla when he battled Ghidorah in America. Rodan said, as Izuku nodded. Okay, so I am to be up against Rodan in my practical? Izuku asked, as Nezu nodded. I know that you kaiju love to have your destructive battles, but at the same time you need to learn that your powerful gigantic kaiju form needs to be mindful of us little people in order to become a better king of the monsters. Nezu explained as Izuku nodded. I hope you know that I might have to leave the school in order to become a king of the kaiju monsters. Izuku said, as Nezu nodded his head. And I will make sure that Monarch has money spent in order to teach you the ethics of becoming the next hero that the monster world needs. Nezu said, as Izuku left the office with a smile on his face. Although that smile on his face was more on the lines of a pained expression since he had been getting more and more annoyed with how he was being attacked by monsters every other week. And to hear that his final exams were going to be against Rodan, the one creature that betrayed his new father, made him somewhat angered. He needed to make sure that he paid in blood for what he did to Mothra in the attack that Ghidorah had dealt to the world. Especially since he had nearly killed the queen of the monsters with his surprise attack on her beautiful wings. Izuku arrived in the lunchroom as he sat down next to Momo as they ate their radiated food. Lunch Rush had managed to make food that had radiated minerals inside of them to give them the ability to eat the same food as everyone else, but still have the radiation that they require to live. Kendo had told Class 1A about how the students were likely to be fighting robots from what she heard from one of the senpais they had. Izuku was highly against the idea about fighting robots for a final exam, but he knew that since he was fighting Rodan for his own finals, the students were going to definitely be fighting the teachers. It was basically being asked for since he and Momo were kaiju in disguise. He and the class arrived in Gym Gamma as they prepared for their final exam's practical test. Since Izuku was nowhere to be seen, everyone thought that Izuku was beginning his battle exercise. Alright students, you will all be taking part in a final exam that will put you all through the ringer and make sure that you utilize your quirks to the fullest extent and pin you against opponents who completely counter you all. I hope you are prepared to be up against your teachers from your classes. Nezu said, as he smiled at them all. The first group was Uraraka Ochako and Aoyama Yuga were up first, and their opponent was Pro Heroine 13. The woman was a very capable pro-heroine as she was number 1 in rescue work as she had saved hundreds if not millions on her own during her tenure as a pro-heroine. She was fighting a battle-trained Ochako as well as a lightly trained Yuga as they were off on the course with great gusto. Although, there was one issue, as soon as 13 used her quirk it started to pull them both in as they were forced to hold on to some rebar as they were coming up with a plan in order to defeat the woman without getting hurt themselves. So, what's your opinion of Midoriya? Yuga asked, as he smiled at Ochako. Ochako's face became so distant that she didn't realize that her face had begun to slowly blush in response to the question, causing her to let go of the rebar she was holding on to. Wait, what are you talking about? Ochako screamed as she flew towards 13. The action catching the heroine by surprise as she stopped her quirk's effect, allowing Ochako to catch the heroine further off guard and use her martial arts and slap the cuffs onto the teacher. The other matches were a mix of wins and losses as they were really pushing themselves in order to come over their teachers in terms of their training. It was all leading up to the largest match that the place was prepping for, Izuku and Rodan. Momo and Ochako were watching the cameras with rapt attention as they heard the distinct stomps that came from Izuku. And from the sky they found a massive pterodactyl land from the air and on top of a building that wasn't much distance from Izuku's Gojira form. They looked at his new state though as his dorsal plates were not as sharp as they used to be, and they were glowing green the entire time. What's with Izuku's new form? Aizawa asked, as he looked at Nezu. It seems for this fight Izuku has altered his form to be more for an agility type of Titan form. I wonder what else he has in store for us. Nezu said, as he kept making notes about Izuku's Gojira form. It was here that Momo and Ochako noticed something growing from Izuku's tail, and the dorsal plates there was forming more as spikes than anything. Wow, I didn't know that Izuku was taking more from the Stegosaurus than we thought. Momo said, as Ochako made her observation. His arms seemed slightly longer as well, but more packed with muscle. As everyone looked even closer to Izuku's Gojira form, and it seemed to be correct. Izuku's Gojira form was still similar to its original, but for some reason he was sleeker, as well as more built for speed as well as power since his legs were still as bulky as they were when he first appeared. His dorsal plates were much longer as well as larger than they were originally, not to mention that they were more curved than sharp, and they seemed to be having a more intimidating effect as they pulsed constantly. It seems like he is taking this threat of Rodan seriously. We can't have our students getting lax in their training. All Might said, as everyone kept a close eye on the incoming fight. With Izuku, he slammed his tail on the ground as Rodan stared at him. He had the experience to keep up with the king of the monsters, even the queen if he wished. But this new Gojira was going to be a hard fight for him since he didn't have arm claws, but only his talons that were as sharp as obsidian when carved into a knife. The buzzer sounded as Izuku took off towards Rodan in a speed that Rodan hadn't seen before except when Godzilla attacked Kong in Beijing. You seem to be getting faster. I can't wait to have you fight Kong's son. Rodan called out as he flew into the air. Just wait until you run out of strength to fly. I will manage to take you down. Izuku called out as he swung his tail towards Rodan. The spiked tail had nearly clipped Rodan's wing as the creature had to make a last-second barrel roll in order to dodge the strike. Where did you get the time to evolve your tail like that? ? Rodan called out, as Izuku ran towards where Rodan was moving towards. Trade secret, Izuku said, as he managed to grab the talon of Rodan and pulled him downwards. As soon as Rodan was in the clutches of Izuku's clawed hands, Izuku had pulled the creature closer to his chest as he started to squeeze the monster as hard as he could until he could hear the sounds of bones creaking in the monster. It didn't stop until Rodan started to struggle to escape and pecked at Izuku's chest as well as arms, causing him to lose his grip from the piercing power of the beak. When Rodan took back to the skies, he decided to go full power from the start. Since Izuku hadn't gone full power and used his atomic ray, he knew that the young Gojira had managed to kill Anguirus all on his own and needed to take him seriously. He was an old titan, sure, but that didn't mean that an old dog couldn't learn new tricks, and he would use a new skill he learned from hawks as well as falcons of the animal kingdom of humanity. He flew up into the air as high as he could go before the air thinned too much for him to handle, and he folded his wings up and pointed his beak towards where he could see Izuku preparing an attack for him. If he failed this last-ditch effort attack, he would be done for, and be at Izuku's mercy, but if this worked, Izuku would probably be at his mercy. He increased his speed in the air as he released a shockwave from behind himself that increased his speed as he became a missile coming towards the earth and Izuku. The young Gojira noticed the speed of which Rodan was coming in and lowered his back to where he would seem to be injured slightly from their small scuffles. Chuckling to himself, he couldn't believe that he managed to deal enough damage to Izuku, and Rodan began to increase his speed further, becoming a red comet in the sky. Izuku smiled as soon as he saw Rodan, chuckling to himself as his plan was coming into fruition. He lowered himself even more as he prepared for the strike of a lifetime. This was a move he used on the male Muto back during the USJ attack, and he would be using it on his grand-uncle here. It would be cathartic if it killed Rodan, but he wasn't aiming for the creature's heart or brain. He was aiming for a spot that would cause no internal injuries except for internal bleeding. And as soon as Rodan was upon Izuku, the Gojira had moved his rear towards Rodan, and the creature noticed it at the last second before attempting to open his wings to pull back, but it was too late. Izuku's spiked tail had landed into Rodan's lower abdomen as it pierced through his thick volcanic skin, and Izuku slammed Rodan into a building, and as soon as he pulled out his tail spikes, it caused Rodan to continue falling through other buildings in the area behind him. As Rodan began to inspect his injuries, he found that he was mostly fine, if it weren't for the small internal bleeding. He slowly got to stand back up when he heard a stomp from nearby, and he found that Izuku was standing right next to him as he stared down at him. Kneel and respect your loss, Izuku growled as Rodan chuckled. You're not trying to become the next king of the monsters? Rodan asked, as Izuku growled at him even more. Fine, you win. But next time I will be the winner, Rodan said, as Izuku's spines glowed even more at the respect he earned. As the buzzer had gone off, the trial was over as Izuku walked away from Rodan, and as soon as he neared the area where he started off at, he transformed back into his hybrid form. You were really strong, uncle. I hope that our next fight isn't as quick as this one was, Izuku said, as he walked away. Rodan chuckled to himself as he flew off towards the nearest volcano in order to consume the radiation from there as well as use the magma to heal all the internal damage that was dealt to him. 1. Off in the Mojave Desert, a large portal appeared as a gauntleted hand had appeared from the ground as the creature who held the weapon had pulled themselves out of it. It was soon revealed to be Kong as he crawled out of the portal and started to huff and puff before looking at his other hand that held a small child. He did some human sign language as he looked at the small child. "Are we close to where Godzilla is resting at the moment?" Kong asked, through hand gestures. "I don't know, but from what I know Gojira had a child here. He might be capable of fighting against Scar King at the moment because of his human intelligence, but he might not be strong enough. We need Godzilla for this, not his son," the child said, as Kong nodded. They both headed for the Arctic Circle. That was where the last known location of Godzilla was recorded. And as they were leaving, they noticed a massive presence coming from behind them, and they saw that a massive orange furred hand was slowly coming out of the portal. "We need to find Godzilla now," the girl said, as both ran towards the Arctic Circle as fast as possible. As Izuku was entering his bedroom though he felt like he noticed a massive presence that didn't belong on the surface of the earth appeared, and it was as strong if not stronger than Godzilla from when the last time he saw him. "Dad, please be safe," Izuku said, as he laid himself on his platform that gave him radiation. Izuku was resting within the radiation core of the planet as he was thinking about his life up until this point in time. He had been the witness of Godzilla fighting Ghidorah, as well as fought a few monsters of his own consisting of the two Mutos that he came across. He fought a massive griffin creature and killed it as well. Then finally he had fought someone who had nearly killed his moth-like mother who was like a second mother to him since the death of his original one at the hands of Godzilla and Ghidorah. Ever since he went on that trip to the convenience store his life had been much more active than it used to be, and he was many times stronger than he was before. With his father moving around the planet with Kong in order to take down a new threat, Izuku was starting to wonder if he should even be king of the monsters anymore. With his strength he could become the best hero in the world, but at the same time, he was starting to feel a burnout from fighting every single monster that came out of the woodworks in order to test his mettle. Like seriously it hadn't been a week since his fight with Rodan that some new monster came out of the ground, and it was freaking Anguirus. Sure he managed to defeat the bastard quickly and sent him back to where he came from, but it was starting to build up a massive migraine that he was suffering from ever since he became the son of Godzilla. He was leaving his home when he came across something moving towards him at an extremely fast pace and Izuku strained his eyes in the deep blue sea in order to see who was coming for him. And he was pleasantly surprised by the fact that another genus of his father's species was moving towards him. Sighing in exasperation he could only do one thing to stave off the migraine that he was getting from fighting all these monsters. He got into a fighting stance in the water and faced off against his much sleeker as well as agile opponent. Izuku was pissed. He hadn't been able to catch the little bastard that was currently swimming in circles around himself. He had already blasted some atomic fire at the creature, but it fired some of its own and managed to push him back a little bit. Sure he was many times stronger than this creature, but with its speed as well as agility, he couldn't land a single blow on it without evolving himself a much sleeker and more agile form that sacrificed his power. He dragged the battle onto a nearby island that wasn't inhabited, or it was unless Monarch had evacuated the civilians from the place so the fight could continue. He ran towards his opponent with a speed that was unparalleled in the water as he moved towards his opponent who just used its legs to jump around him in order to dodge attacks. Izuku screamed out in fury as he started to charge up his atomic power as he moved in for a powerful left hook. Only to have left hook be grabbed and pulled downward as he growled at the creature in front of himself. Opening his mouth right at the creature's face, his atomic breath smashed into the creature as it moved away as fast as possible in order to keep itself alive. Knowing now to not cause Izuku to be close to it, the creature used hit-and-run tactics in order to whittle Izuku's defense down. What little energy he had to fight back was now causing Izuku to be completely out of energy. As soon as that happened, the new creature, Izuku was now dubbing Zilla, had jumped in for a kill shot as Izuku opened his eyes at the last moment and spun his body around, smashing his tail into Zilla, forcing it to retreat into the watery depths. Kneeling down on the ground, Izuku thought about everything that was happening at the moment. I seriously need to get back in shape. After fighting Rodan with my new body I need to evolve again in order to... He couldn't finish his thought process when two of the same creatures he just sent off into the ocean had appeared and started to come towards him. Standing back up, Izuku roared at them as he glared harshly at their scavenger-like eyes. They moved in as they attacked his massive legs. Okay. I am going to call you bastards Orgas since you all are simply smaller versions of me with a much sleeker body type. Izuku said, as he got rewarded for his naming of them with atomic fire to the face. Once the smoke cleared up, Izuku coughed up some smoke as his face was covered in soot as well as ash. Glaring at the two Orgas below him, he moved slowly towards them as they moved around him as if they were hunting him themselves. That was when more started to appear from the ocean as Izuku became worried about his life as they were coming in treasure troves of waves. Izuku hardened his expression as he roared out loud trying to call for Godzilla to come to his aid. He knew that fighting this many opponents would be too much for his massive frame to do, so he decided to hold out until his father would arrive. He knew that his father was in the middle of his own fight, but he needed his father's presence now. The Orga colony attacked Izuku as the young titan had managed to attack back as they clashed in the middle of the island. Swirling around Izuku was met with nothing but air, as the Orgas had landed on his back as they tried to break into his hide with their teeth as well as claws, but nothing worked for them. Izuku swung his body around to toss them off, but the damage they were doing to him was starting to show as his titan form started to release sweat from the time it took him to fight them all. He continued his fight for survival as he managed to strike one of the Orgas down, which caused him to notice how their hide was not as tough as his own, which caused a smirk to show on his face. He just needed one good hit on one of them and he would be capable of taking them all down, and as he fought them hard, their claws as well as teeth started to break down his tough exterior as Izuku's blood started to drip down from their injuries that affected him. His body was slowly moving at a pace where he couldn't keep an eye on them, and he just thought about survival, so he moved towards the ocean where he knew that they wouldn't be capable of keeping up with him. That was a week ago and Izuku was now licking his wounds. He had never seen a colony that big for the Orgas. His father still hadn't come to his aid, and he was left alone as the Orgas were trying to break into his radiator core where he could grow as well as heal from his injuries. If they got into here, it would be over for him since they would grow in power as well and their bodies would increase in defenses. Moving over towards where they were trying to get into his area, he moved inside of the hole and covering it up with massive amounts of gold as well as silver. Moving back towards a nearby island, the one where he fought them all originally, Izuku continued his fighting of them on his own as he thought about plans to take them all down without wasting energy. Well shit. Izuku growled out as he had managed to take down a major portion of the colony, but they just kept coming in treasure troves, which was overwhelming him. He couldn't keep this up forever as he knew that being overwhelmed was a very bad thing, especially that migraine that had increased exponentially ever since he was brought into the fight with them. As he continued to send kick after kick, scratch after scratch, and tail swipe after another, he found himself standing on an island filled with corpses of the colony, but his body was slowly failing him. Moving back towards the water, he decided to heal as much as possible before moving on to the next fight. He would need it. They were taking longer to defeat, and it would be a matter of time before his life would be expired, but as soon as he was about to reach the area where the radiator core was located, his titanic body gave out as he transformed into his human form. His scales covering his human body like an armor as he took in all his injuries. Damn, I thought I had more time before this happened, Izuku said, before feeling his leg get grabbed from behind. Looking behind himself, he found one of the Orgas holding onto his left leg as it tried to pull him apart. Growling even more, he pulled a fist back and punched it in the nose as it let go and scurried off. Looking at his now bleeding leg, he sighed as he felt his head again as it was now increasing in pain. Moving into the radiation core of the planet, he laid himself on the ground as he took in radiation, and that was when his mother decided to appear before him. Izuku, I know that you're hurting, but don't you think that something is wrong if you are having a migraine that lasts for more than a day? Inko asked, as her mirage had looked at him worryingly. Mom, I know that you're just a mirage, but I'm fine, it's probably just a GRH. Izuku grunted as his head flared up in pain once again. It was here that someone else arrived in the cave as Izuku looked up to find Momo standing there looking worriedly at him. Izuku, are you all right? She asked, concerned. I don't feel so good at the moment. I need to heal from my injuries, Izuku said, as he grunted in pain. Momo then laid herself next to him as Izuku tried to hold his head as he grunted every now and then in massive amounts of pain. Pulling up a phone, she called up Roden in order to see what was going on with Izuku, but unknown to them, Monarch was coming up with an answer as to why Izuku was losing against the Orga colony. You're telling us that Izuku needs to evolve his body in order to fix his mental brainwaves? Nezu asked, as Serizawa nodded. In order for the Gojira specimen who is having issues with headaches to migraines, that is a major sign of their body needing an evolution. We need to take him to the Antarctic, Serizawa said, as he looked at the radiation readings of Izuku. Well, what are we waiting for? Get him on the ship and make sure that we place him in the Antarctic. Nezu called out as everyone prepared for their journey to the South Pole. A few hours after their sudden realization, they all had Izuku in the medical bay of the base as they were making a few last adjustments to Izuku's body in order to record everything that would happen to the boy. As soon as Izuku left the base, they watched as he moved towards the sheet of ice that appeared in front of him as he placed his body down and fell asleep. As soon as that happened, for some reason the air around them began to decrease in temperature, as Izuku's Titan form was completely covered in ice as Izuku's body temperature lowered to a level where he was in hibernation. Well, the evolution has begun. You see those emerald colors below the boy? Serizawa asked, as Aizawa and Nezu nodded their heads. Those are radiation cores that are pure radiation at its purest state. Izuku's going to get a massive upgrade with this new form, and he will be capable of holding off the colony of Orgas without much help. He will be much faster, stronger, as well as more capable of battling multiple opponents. Serizawa informed. So will he be capable of returning to school in the next couple of days? We need to make sure that he's all right since he needs to be learning. Aizawa said, as Serizawa nodded. It should ultimately be up to him whether or not he becomes a hero. But we will have to wait a while before he exits his evolution chamber. As they all watched over the sleeping giant that was Izuku, nobody even noticed how some of the Orgas were making their way over to the sleeping Titan. As in the water, millions upon millions of Orgas were making their way over to where Izuku was located, as there was one thing going on in their hive mind. Prevent new king's birth. Izuku was evolving within the small ice chamber he created within the Antarctic southern pole of the planet. He was making sure that he could take on whoever was the leader of the smaller creatures who wouldn't leave him alone. As his body evolved as well as changed its body structure in order to make his new appearance more intimidating to see, nobody even noticed the massive creature coming out of the ocean off the coast of the Antarctic Ocean nearby. The creature looked turtle-like in looks, but it was anything but turtle-like if they got an even closer look at the creature. It had a look in its eyes that marked it as an alpha predator that was on a mission in order to keep its rival out of business in terms of being the alpha predator of the surface world. Izuku's size was nothing compared to Godzilla, as the G-Man was only around 200 meters taller than Izuku was, as the young Titan was still growing to his maximum height. As soon as the Orga had made landfall, it stood up to around 95 meters in height as it looked over to where it could see an emerald glow coming from some nearby ice shelves. Moving as fast as it could, it made its way over to Izuku's form as it charged a blast from its mouth. This blast would be enough to push Izuku out of his evolving state, as it would proceed without him needing to be sleeping to do so. As the Orga had released its blood-red beam of energy towards the ice, it caused Izuku to be blasted away from the ice shelf and away from his evolving spot. Standing back up to his full height of 120 meters, Izuku stared down on the Orga as it stared at him with a mirth in its eyes as it roared. Scrio RRG. Izuku stared down at his new opponent as it looked dangerously different from the smaller Godzilla hybrids he fought. So this is the monster that sent those little bastards after me. I've got enough sleep in me to fight this monster for supremacy. I think I've got this. Izuku thought before he roared at his new opponent. Discount Godzilla roar. 3. Izuku was seriously regretting challenging this monster back as he was being tossed around like a ragdoll. Like, seriously, how was this creature able to pick him up? He was over 90,000 tons of pounds and shit. This was not going to be fun if this keeps up. As he was kicked in the chest that sent him through many sheets of ice, he continued to regenerate any damage he had taken as he shook his body from the ice on top of his body. Standing back up, he found himself moving towards a beam clash between him and the opponent. He believes that this is the true Orga that he was supposed to fight. Those smaller Orgas were seriously easy prey to defeat as well as consume. He charged his new emerald beam of radiation fire towards the Orga as it charged its own blast of red plasma. As both monsters had released their powerful blasts from their mouths, the beams clashed in the middle as they battled for dominance. Izuku's emerald ray of radiated fire was pushing as much as he could in order to make sure that the Orga would lose this struggle. But from the Orga's view it smirked at Izuku before releasing more of his red plasma from his mouth before Izuku's beam had started to struggle to hold it back before breaking its hold and slamming back into Izuku. As the young titan was blasted through even more ice sheets, he eventually fell into the ocean waters as he struggled to get his bearings and decided to move away from the area in order to find a more suitable fighting area. The Orga roared into the sky announcing its official win against Izuku as he chased after Izuku's scent trail. Izuku arrived on Monster Island as he needed to recover from the humiliation of losing to Orga. He was completely overpowered by the creature as he had never fought something on par with it before. He was sitting in his cave in his human form as he thought about what to do for a future fight when he heard the telltale sounds of Orga coming towards his position. "How does he know my location?" Izuku said, anxiously. "As much as I would love to have Godzilla here to help me fight Orga, I need to learn how to fight these monsters on my own. I won't be capable of proving my title of King of the Monsters in the future if I am relying on Dad so much." Izuku mumbled to himself as he prepared himself for another fight. As soon as the Orga had appeared in front of Izuku, the young man watched as the monster looked at him for a second before transforming into its hybrid human form. It was an extremely curvy woman with dark blue hair who had a look of smugness on her face as she walked over towards Izuku. Her eyes were making Izuku nervous because of how she looked at him. Licking her lips, the Orga smiled at Izuku with a mirth in her eyes as Izuku prepared for another fight. His dark green scales on his body hardening as he got into a combat stance in preparation for a fight for survival. "You are so good looking, little one. I can't wait to break you into being the king of the monsters," the woman said, as she licked her lips even more, bringing a pink hue to her lips. Izuku audibly gulped as he moved a single step behind himself as he pointed his right arm towards the woman in his combat stance as he stared at her for a small bit in trepidation as he launched towards her. His new body was trying to evolve itself as he fought her as they went blow for blow in their human forms. Orga had gone for newer martial arts styles as she dodges and weaves through Izuku's aggressive fighting style. He managed to land a tail swipe on her as she was sent flying into a rock face as a smoke cloud covered the area as Izuku stared into the cloud, silently wishing for the fight to finally be over. But as soon as he heard a feminine chuckle, he was back on guard as he looked forwards, waiting for her to move out of the smoke when he felt some breath over his neck. Jumping forwards, he just barely dodged a strike meant for beheading his body and saying goodbye to his brain. "Ah, that was supposed to knock you out. Oh well. I love how my prey has to run before I get to them," the woman said, as she glared happily at Izuku. "Okay, she is both faster as well as stronger than me. Why did I want to fight her again?" Izuku thought to himself before receiving a punch to the face for his distracted thoughts. "I thought the son of Godzilla and Mothra would be strong, but you are disappointing me, little one. But if you are this weak, I will have to come back later to lay claim on you, unless you are hiding something within you," the woman asked, as Izuku glared at her with fear as well as bravery. "The reason why I may seem so weak is probably because I'm not even a few months old as a new titan," Izuku said, as the woman looked at him with a look of pure shock as well as confusion. "You fight as if you had to fight for a long time, at least 1,000,000 years at most. How are you this experienced?" the woman asked once more as she was now curious. "Let's just say that I had to learn the hard way growing up as a human," Izuku said, as he started to power up his atomic fire not from his mouth, but from his hands. Pulling them into a spot in front of him, he cupped his hands in a dome right in the middle of his chest just a few inches away from his upper torso as he focused all his power into this one attack. If he could get this attack off, he would flee from this creature as well as very odd woman in order to recover from his growing fear as well as anxiety of fighting a woman who wants to do something to him. As the woman watched him charge this attack, she started to giggle at him as she walked towards him. "If you think an attack similar to a creature from a television show will work, you are sorely mistaken," the woman said, as Izuku glared at her harder. "I may be too weak to fight you now, but I will come back stronger than before and put you down, maybe not for good though," Izuku said, with a slight blush on his face. As the blast was ready to be thrown, the woman was already in front of him with a smirk on her face as Izuku stared her down as her face became as close to his own as it blushed even more from the proximity. "Well, aren't you going to throw that blast at me? If I remember correctly, this attack was from Piccolo from Dragon Ball Z. Light grenade, correct?" The woman asked, as she smiled sultry-like at Izuku. Correct, but at the same time, I would like to tell you something. Izuku said, as he placed slightly more power into it. What is that little lizard? She asked, placing a finger under his chin and lifting it up towards her face. I already have a teacher who is similar to you at school. I don't need another Midnight Sensei as a monster around me looking for a good session with me. Izuku said, as he released the blast at the woman's unguarded body. As the woman's body was covered with a bright emerald light, Izuku used this to hightail it out of there in order to return to his father's nesting grounds to regenerate his body enough to return and fight. But as he was leaving the place, he felt something pierce his body, and as he looked down, he found a barb coming from his lower abdomen. As he pulled it out, as emerald-lighted blood flowed out of his wound. Diving into the ocean, he transformed into his Titan form as he dove into the depths of the ocean seeking refuge. As he dove deeper though, an emerald-like blood flowed to the surface of the ocean as Orga looked down at the water with a smile on her face. He actually released an attack like that on me at close range, even lowered my guard enough to make it do damage. Orga said, as she looked at her missing hand. Slapping her arm again, her hand regenerated from seemingly nothing as she walked over to the slimy water as she dove into it, searching for where the blood trail led her to. Izuku laid down in the nesting grounds of his father's home. He had known that his father would probably make him leave at some point because a child shouldn't stay with their parents forever. His wound had finally healed enough to where he could fall asleep to finish his evolution, and as he laid there sleeping, he found that his dreams were haunted by the creature that killed his mother. Ghidorah screamed at Godzilla as he launched lightning bolts at the alpha predator of the planet with massive quantities of power. The Gojira specimen against him merely grunted in slight annoyance as the electric storm had slammed into his body as he attacked Ghidorah again. Both launched attacks at one another, creating shockwaves in the area as they had stray blasts as well as lightning move in a direction towards a small convenience store. They heard the sounds of screaming as they stopped their fight to look over at the insignificant humans below as they both saw something incredible. A small green-haired boy had stared at the clothes of his destroyed mother, or what remained of the clothes. The small boy was radiating with both of their power. It seemed as if he absorbed their power and placed it into his body, bonding with the power they were given by their gods. As Ghidorah was prepared to have the hatchling learn under him as his new reincarnation in the future, Godzilla regained his senses and attacked the creature as he chased it off into the sky. Ghidorah never looked down to see Godzilla huff in exhaustion as it looked down to the human boy and help him leave the area and into Godzilla's lair. Izuku stared at the area surrounding himself in his dreams as he found Ghidorah staring him down as he giggled haughtily. So you are the reincarnation that we have wished to have. Don't worry, little one, we won't take control over your body. We will be bestowing you our regenerative powers as well as our control over lightning and electricity. Ghidorah said, as Izuku fearfully looked at Ghidorah. What makes you think that I can believe you? Izuku asked, growling softly. Well, how else are we supposed to help our hatchling? Ghidorah said, as it breathed a lightning storm over Izuku's dream self, forcing him out of his dream state. Izuku woke up with a start as he heard the sounds of the nesting grounds being tossed around as if something was searching for him. He looked around his surroundings as he found himself a lot bigger than he was before as he looked at his body. It felt a lot different from before. He couldn't understand what he was feeling, but it felt like he was prepared for anything now. He took the time to look at a small puddle of ocean water as he saw his new face, as he smiled in happiness. His face had stayed the same as before, with only the exception of two sets of horns covering his head as if they were a crown on his head. His spikes on his back were a lot longer as well as sharper as he stood back up, and he also noticed how he felt something begging to be released from his back as he finally was standing at full height. As soon as he released the feeling that wanted to be released from his back, he felt something flapping on the sides of his body as he found bat-like moth wings fluttering behind him. Soft growling and clicking sounds. I will also make a note that in this story Godzilla isn't 300 plus feet anymore, he is much bigger now. Thank you all for this interruption and let's get back to the story. With his new form, Izuku looked over towards what was wrecking his nesting grounds and found that it was the Orga from before. Looking closely, he found that she was seemingly trying to create a nest here in preparation for something to happen soon. Shaking his head and starting to move, he noticed how the Orga had noticed something wrong with the area she was in as she turned around and found Izuku standing before her as he slowly moved in her direction. She stared at his new form with slight recognition in her eyes as she moved forwards as she stood in front of Izuku. Their height difference wasn't that much before he transformed and mutated his appearance in order to take her on. This time though he was at least double her height as he stared her down. Izuku's tail swished behind himself as the spikes that resembled a stegosaurus, tail spikes were much longer than before as he stared down at his opponent. She went for a strike for his upper chest as Izuku stayed still for a moment before looking into her eyes as he noticed that he didn't feel a thing compared to her attack. Pulling his tail back from behind himself, he watched as the horror struck true with the Orga's face as he swung his tail at her, causing her to try and dodge his tail swipe. It missed, but barely managed to deal enough piercing damage to her face that she moved backwards as Izuku surged forwards in order to end the fight before he would lose control over this new form. Moving faster than Orga could even perceive, Izuku appeared behind her as he grabbed her with his arms and pinned her to the ground as he wrapped his longer tail around her body as he held her down. "You will leave these grounds, and you will never look at me the same way you did before today again, do I make myself clear?" Izuku growled out towards Orga. "Why yes Alpha, I will leave," Orga called out in her titanic voice. As soon as Izuku released her from his grip he noticed something wrong with the moment he released her from his grip as just when he released her, she became her human form, making him change his forms back to his human look. As soon as he was back to being his relatively short human form, he saw that Orga was looking at him with hearts in her eyes. This caused him to move slightly away from her as he made his way back to his resting spot in the middle of Atlantis. "Surely you can give me some children for the future?" Orga asked, as Izuku slowly moved backwards even more. "Sorry, I am mated with my own moth mate. I can't accept your feelings unless my mate informs me that I can allow more in," Izuku said, looking away. As Orga looked saddened, she smiled to herself as she went to leave the area as she looked back at Izuku with a new look in her eyes. "Well, so long as she says that I can join your titanic harem, I will wait until then," she said, before leaving into the ocean. As she left, Izuku was placed in even more confusion as he didn't know what was supposed to happen after he rejected her. "What the hell was that?" a voice asked behind him, and as he turned, he found Momo with a look on her face that described jealousy. "Momo, what are you doing here?" Izuku asked, as Momo looked at him with a jealous and confused look. "I have been here the entire time. I've been waiting for you to come to school for the last few days." What had happened in the last few days? Momo asked, as she looked at Izuku's fearful face. "You have no idea, and I believe that I deserve a break after the last couple days," Izuku said, as he laid himself next to Momo. Izuku woke up within the broken-down Atlantis home where he saw Momo sleeping on the ground nearby him. Walking over to the sleeping young woman, he wrapped his arms around her as he let out a few clicks and groans as she slowly woke up from her slumber. "Morning," she said, with a sleepy face. "Morning, we will need to prepare for school soon. I will be heading out as well, need to make sure the territory is protected from unworthy opponents," Izuku said, as he walked towards the waterway out of the Atlantis core where the Hollow Earth construct entrance was located. As Momo gathered enough radiation from the core as she could, she got up from where she was sleeping from and started to walk around the place before finding the waterway to leave. With Izuku, the young man had transformed into his Titan form as he was swimming about the place as he searched for active threats against his reign as Godzilla's son. As he surfaced from the ocean waters below, he saw that the oil rig that was made into a Monarch base of operations was still quiet. Izuku swam in another direction towards UA. He was nearing the land where Japan was located as he stepped onto the land as he transformed into his smaller human form. As he shook the water from his hair, he walked up the steps in order to head towards the school as he thought about everything that had been happening lately with all these monster attacks on him as well as his school. Shaking his head, he could only hope that something similar to King Ghidorah would never come to the earth and shake things up. Looking at his emerald-colored dorsal plates on his back, Izuku smiled at how they glowed ominously and pulsed for every new fight he entered. He soon found himself standing in front of Ua as he was about to enter the school, but there was a slight issue. As he tried to enter the school grounds, he wasn't allowed into the school. It wasn't much longer before one of his teachers had arrived in order to see the confusion on his face as they allowed him inside the school grounds. "You've been missing for at least 2 weeks. We were wondering what happened to you to make you miss school for 2 weeks in a row, Midoriya," Aizawa said, as he led the boy not to class but towards the principal's office. "Sorry Aizawa-sensei, I've just been busy with keeping some monsters in line. They keep attacking me ever since the end of the USJ attack," Izuku said, as Aizawa nodded. "Well, I certainly hope that you won't have to worry about schoolwork after today," the man said, causing Izuku to look confused. As Izuku was sat inside the principal's office, the young titan couldn't help but feel slightly worried as he stared at the beady eyes of Nezu as the creature gave him a sigh. "Well, as much as I would love to have you learn at my school, young Midoriya, I can't allow your presence to stay at my school anymore," the principal said, bluntly. What?" Izuku asked, concerned and saddened. "Your presence will be placing my students in danger. It's not your fault. But it is the fault of your stepfather who had transformed you into a titan of his own volition," Nezu said, as he sighed even more. What are you doing? Am I being expelled from UA?" Izuku asked, as his eyes began to tear up. "As much as I would rather not, I am being forced to. The HPSC have told me that they cannot allow a monster's son to enter my school, and they had vetoed my choice in the matter. There isn't anything I can do about it. I apologize. My hands are tied," Nezu said, as Izuku nodded. "Well, I think I got myself a new enemy," Izuku muttered as his tail whipped about behind himself. "I know that this is hard to hear, Midoriya-kun, but you cannot attack the HPSC," Nezu said, as Izuku looked at him. "What can they do? They are ruining my chances of becoming a hero, all because of the fact that I'm Godzilla's son. I will not let this slander go on for much longer," Izuku said, as he got up to leave. "They might have a way to take you down, Midoriya," Nezu yelled as Izuku turned his head as his eyes glowed ominously. "That's what they think. But there is something that you all should know. Gojiras can never be controlled. Especially by feeble humans," Izuku said, as he started to leave. As soon as the boy was walking through the halls, Nezu looked at Aizawa as the man looked concerned for all the innocents near the HPSC building in the city of Tokyo. "Aizawa, alert any and all heroes near the HPSC building that they need to evacuate the innocents near the HPSC building. But not the HPSC bigwigs. They will be getting their own version of justice," Nezu said, as Aizawa started calling the heroes within Tokyo. With Izuku, the young man was slowly letting the fury he was holding within grow to astronomical levels as he transformed into a titan form. He was now around 100 meters tall as he started to make his way over to Tokyo. Whilst Izuku was walking over in the general direction of Tokyo, he never noticed how Momo had arrived and saw the fury on his face as he walked down the street in the middle of transforming. Once Izuku finally made it to Tokyo, the young titan had started to make his way over to the HPSC building as he saw the small humans running for their lives as he made sure that he didn't hit any of them. They were innocent in all of this, so him coming towards the HPSC building, he knew who weren't even really innocent within the building. He caught the eye of the president of the HPSC for Japan's branch of the group meant to keep an eye on the heroes of their country. She was glaring hard at him with an evil smile on her face as Izuku's face scowled harder than her own as he stopped in front of her. "Well, it seems like the monster had come to us. That makes things easier for us," the president of the commission said, with an evil smile. Izuku glared harder at the woman as his dorsal plates started to glow ominously and pulse as he raised a clawed hand towards the woman as he slammed it down on her original position as she just managed to jump out of the way. Reporters were recording the interaction between Izuku as well as the commission president as they were seemingly confused as to why the young hero in training would attack the HPSC by himself. They also had started to see that the young titan was charging an attack at the building itself as he glared harshly at the president as the woman could only hear a telepathic entrance into her mind. "To think that you HPSC grunts think you could take over the world with your mere presence. All of you are villains in my eyes. I will be taking each and every one of you out in every country. You can count on it," Izuku growled in his telepathic link before cutting it off and launching his breath attack into the building, killing all inside as the president of the commission was saved by Hawks. As the commission president had stared at the remains of her hard work and dedication to everything hero related, She let out an anguished cry as she glared at Izuku, who turned in her direction. He glared harder at her as Hawks attempted to dodge a strike that he thought was for him, as the hero had accidentally lost his grip on the commission president. The commission president was now in Izuku's clawed hand as he pulled the woman up to his face, and the woman could see the flames in his eyes as he glared at her with every fiber of his being. "If you think your glare will scare me, you have another problem coming to you," the commission president said, as she angrily tried to use her quirk against Izuku. Her quirk was mind control in the smallest minute detail. So long as she had eye contact with someone, then she could control them from their mind. She saw the inner workings of her quirk taking effect into the Titan as she could only smile madly as she thought that she had won against Izuku. "Now that you are under my control, you will become me pet for the foot," the woman said, before she was lifted into the air and dropped into Izuku's mouth. As Izuku completely swallowed the woman, Izuku felt the smallest effects of the woman's mind control stop working entirely. She seriously thought that her measly mind control could work on me. She was weaker than I thought. Now to take down each and every HPSC in the world, Izuku thought to himself as he started to walk over towards the ocean in order to take his anger out on the Hero Public Safety Commission around the globe. Once Izuku left the area, Hawks was looking at the destroyed HPSC building as he felt something within him for once. "I'm free," the young hero muttered before flying back to his agency in another district. As soon as Izuku landed at the ocean, he decided to move around in the water, letting the Titan personality within him take over for the moment as he was still distraught with his expelling from UA. At UA, the teachers as well as students were fearful after they had just seen Midoriya take down the commission building without any kind of trouble. And as they looked to one another, they thought that UA was next, so they demanded to be protected from Midoriya at all costs from the teachers as well as Nezu. The Stoat had informed them all that the school wouldn't be targeted by the young Titan as he has no problems with their school as a whole. But they should probably make sure that they aren't pulled into any other country's problems since they have their own issues. Within the United States, a certain #1 heroine from that country was standing on top of her squadron of planes as their mission from the Hero Commission was to try and take down Godzilla's son. Sadly, they didn't know who the son of Godzilla was in terms of his human form, so they had to rely on Stars and Stripe in order to take him down. As Stars and Stripe had watched the waters below, she could swear that she saw something flash into her mind as it showed a massive creature staring down at her as she was the last of her squad left looking at the giant creature. Shaking her head, she only knew one thing about this whole situation, that whoever attacks this thing will only meet their makers. There was no way she had the strength to fight the king of the monster's son, who was growing in strength as well as evolving every single day. Monarch had gotten news about Izuku attacking the HPSC building within Japan as they all scrambled to make sure that they could prevent the deaths of innocents around the world. As they were scrambling to inform their other bases around the world, they were unaware of the fact that someone important was coming aboard their oil rig base. This person was All For One. He was here to collect every bit of information about a certain Godzilla specimen, especially after learning of the Titan's placement within the world as well as his expelling from UA. "I can't wait to give Tamura a new pet," All For One said, as he smiled within his mask. The sounds of roaring could be heard off in the distance. Loud stomps of feet on the ground were getting closer to the person who was sitting on the ground staring at the sky. A large creature was destroying the main building for the HPSC, and it had green and black scales. Around hundreds of dorsal plates moving along its back as it stomped on the remains of the building, roaring out in a blood rage. Staring at what remained of the building itself, however, revealed that there were some HPSC members who survived the random attack. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. The person watching this event muttered to themselves. My, now isn't that a treat? I never thought that Godzilla would willingly attack the HPSC, my mole inside there is dead." A very regal voice called out behind the person. Turning to look at the man behind himself, the person shook in pure fear as there stood a man who was nearly as tall as All Might. He had this presence that made you feel as though you were a mouse inside a small cage. His aura was that of a very particularly strong villain. Someone who could take on the best the heroes could throw at him and easily defeat them without so much as a thought. His suit and tie were black in color. Aside from his undershirt that was white as could be, the mask over his face left little to the imagination as to what he was thinking. The singular red glow from where the eyes were, however, set the person off into the deepest parts of their fear. The clacking of his shoes on the ground made the person immediately move out of the man's way for fear that they'll attack him. He watched as the man continued to walk towards the giant monster that was causing mayhem and destruction. But it appeared that the giant monster wasn't alone in this fight, as a giant bat monster had appeared from out of nowhere. They screeched at the suit-wearing man, catching the attention of the green-scaled monster. It growled at the suit-wearing villain before raising its foot. "What a neat little quirk you have there. It will be useful to my collection," the voice said, almost as regal as it was before, but an undertone of malicious intent. The monster glared down at the man, as though he were trying to tell the man that something was not right about his words. That was when the person heard the sounds of something charging up, and looking at the end of the tail. Were those dorsal plates glowing? They continued to glow until they reached the precipice of the creature's head before it opened its massive maw. Deep inside the throat of the creature, a green and blue glow had ominously began to glow brighter and brighter. And the man who held a hand out towards the creature had placed his palm on the creature's leg. Well, foot, but it's the thought that matters. And then he could swear he had heard the sound of confusion from the man as he tried to activate his quirk on the creature. Almost instantaneously later, the man was completely engulfed in a massive beam of green and blue energy, completely wiping him off from the face of the earth. What? How did he? Where did he? The person asked, before the giant monster above him looked over and saw him. Walking over, the person looked up as the entire viewpoint changes to that of the monsters. Kneeling over to look at the person closely, the monster looked into the person's eyes. They were a neat black color with black hair on top of their head, but the weird part about them was the weird white spots on their hair. Tilting its head, it spoke to him telepathically. "Does your hair have anything to do with your quirk?" the monster asked the child. The boy asked, before passing out on the ground. "Damn, I didn't mean to scare him into unconsciousness," the creature muttered. "I mean Izuku, we need to go. Ua is coming with multiple heroes. I think they want to fight." A familiar voice called out to Izuku. "Okay, let's head towards the water." "Momo," Izuku replied as he turned and walked towards the ocean. As they left the area, nobody noticed the small trace of blood on the ground as it slowly formed the man from before. He was breathing heavily before he coughed a bit of phlegm and some blood out from his stomach as he screamed out a few words. How in the hell is he quirkless? The end. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Drop purple hearts in the comments so I can know who watches the video till the end, and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.